The world had never felt smaller. Even the tallest mountains seemed to shrink beneath the weight of emptiness, their peaks dull and lifeless, stripped of warmth. The sky, once a canvas of endless possibility, had fallen silent. Clouds, gray and heavy, hung low, motionless, as if they too were caught in the pause that Amaterasu's withdrawal had imposed upon the world. Without the sun, the land felt hollow, drained of vitality, as though every leaf, every blade of grass, and every drop of water held its breath in quiet panic. Shadows pressed into the corners of valleys and forests, curling and pooling in the absence of light, revealing textures that had never been noticed before. The rough bark of ancient trees, the jagged lines of cliffs, the glittering surfaces of dew frozen in semi-darkness. Amaterasu's retreat into Amano Iwato was not a subtle absence. It was a cataclysm. The cave yawned like a wound in the fabric of the heavens, a dark sanctuary untouched by mortal eyes, yet vibrating with divine intensity. Inside, the goddess moved with the slow precision of one who both demands solitude and fears it. Every step echoed against the polished stone. Every inhalation a thunderclap against the stillness. Her hair, cascading like liquid light, pooled around her feet, illuminating the cave in wavering brilliance that did not escape the shadow's reach. She had closed the door to the world, but the world pressed relentlessly against it. Beyond the cave, the consequences were immediate and visceral. Rivers thickened with sediment, sluggish and gray, their surfaces reflecting not sunlight, but an uncertain void. Forests grew muted, leaves drooping with exhaustion, their edges crisped from frost that never thawed. Even the wind seemed hesitant, moving in feeble currents, whispering through branches in hushed tones. Animals wandered uncertainly. Foxes hesitated on paths, their ears twitching, while birds perched in rigid clusters, calling softly to no answer. Humans fumbled through daily tasks, tilled fields lying barren, seeds refusing to sprout, their labor ineffective in the absence of life-giving warmth. Mortals spoke in murmurs, offering prayers that felt empty even to themselves, as if the universe had grown deaf. Inside the cave, Amaterasu wrestled with the tempest of her emotions. Anger throbbed like a pulse in her chest, sorrow wrapped around her like a heavy cloak, and a stubborn pride kept her anchored in place. She traced patterns along the cave walls with delicate fingers, feeling the cool hardness beneath her touch, imagining the trembling of the earth outside. Each echo she produced bounced back with the layers of reflection, amplifying her thoughts, her doubts, her regrets. Time stretched. Hours blended into centuries. Moments dilated into infinity. The weight of her own absence pressed upon her shoulders, a tangible force she could neither escape nor release. The minor gods stirred at the edges of the mortal world, restless and anxious. They paced invisible corridors, their forms shimmering faintly like heat waves on water, their gestures imperceptible but charged with intent. Some drifted through the forests, coaxing stubborn buds to swell, whispering encouragement to timid creatures. Others hovered over rivers and lakes, tracing invisible currents, ensuring life's thread remained intact despite the goddess's withdrawal. Even in her isolation, Amaterasu's radiance touched them, faint but undeniable, a reminder that she had not abandoned existence entirely, only suspended it in solemn reflection. The cave itself seemed alive, silent witness to the goddess's turmoil. Stalactites and stalagmites glimmered faintly, as if breathing with her, reflecting light in soft, trembling waves. The air tasted of cool stone, sharp and metallic, mingling with a subtle sweetness of lingering divine energy. Amaterasu could feel the pulse of the world beyond, the quivering of earth and leaf, the faint hum of human activity, the tentative stirrings of animal life. All of it waited, collectively holding its breath, aware that the sun goddess's return was not simply desirable, it was essential. Yet for all her isolation, a flicker of curiosity began to emerge, fragile and almost imperceptible. It stirred in response to memory, laughter in the gardens of the heavens, wind dancing across mountains, the smell of rain on fertile soil. It was not yet forgiveness, not yet surrender, but a crack in the armor of solitude, a recognition that life could not be suspended indefinitely, that anger and withdrawal, though powerful, were insufficient to sustain the balance of creation. And somewhere, just beyond perception, the faint stirrings of intervention began to take shape, a dance of spirits, the rustling of leaves, a glimmering path for light to follow. The pause of the cosmos was not eternal. Even in the deepest darkness, the threads of hope, patience, and subtle mischief were gathering, ready to weave the first movements of reconciliation. Light, life, and laughter had not been extinguished. They merely waited, held in tension, poised for the moment when the goddess would step forward once more. The stage was set, invisible yet palpable, for the drama of restoration, for a journey that would bridge divine pride and cosmic duty, sorrow and joy, shadow and radiance. The world had become a brittle, hollow thing, as if every leaf, river, and blade of grass were holding their breath in anticipation. The sun had vanished, swallowed by the unyielding cave of Amano Iwato, and with it went warmth, light, and certainty. Every morning dawned in muted gray. The sky, once a living canvas, streaked with gold and indigo, now hung as a dim, endless veil. Birds perched silently in skeletal trees, their feathers ruffled, beaks trembling, as if they too sensed the absence of the great goddess. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move, whispering feebly through the cracks of mountains, carrying a dust of frost that neither thawed nor settled. The earth was alive with tension, trembling beneath the muted heartbeat of the cosmos, and mortals shivered under the cold shadow, unsure how to till soil or read the seasons. Amaterasu herself, cloaked in light so pure it frightened her even in the solitude of her cave, trembled with a fury that had no outlet. Anger was a fire that consumed without light. She had withdrawn not merely from the world, but from her own kin, feeling the sting of Suzanu's reckless wrath and the betrayal of a cosmos she had believed aligned with harmony. She pressed her palms to the smooth, cold stone of the cave, feeling the vibrations of a distant river, the faint quiver of trees, and the tremor of animals cowering under unseen shadows. She could taste the bitterness of retreat on her tongue, acrid as smoke curling from a dying fire, and feel the press of centuries in her chest. Every heartbeat was loud in the echoing void, each pulse a reminder that the world suffered because she had turned away. Outside, the absence of Amaterasu was a vacuum that pulled at the very marrow of life. Streams thickened with silt, plants drooped in despair, and the air itself carried the metallic tang of uncertainty. A young deer lifted its nose to the air, nostrils flaring, ears twitching at the faint hum of movement that was neither predator nor prey. A farmer, hands raw and cracked from tending soil that refused to yield, paused mid-step, squinting at the gray horizon, wondering if the sun had ever truly existed, or if the memory of light was a cruel invention of imagination. Across the land, rivers lost their silver shimmer, mountains lost their imposing dignity, and the rhythm of existence faltered like a drum missing its beat. The world had become a patient, holding its breath, waiting for the goddess to return. In her isolation, Amaterasu wrestled with conflicting emotions. She was sorrowful, yet stubborn, reflective, yet irate. The cave pressed in with a cool, almost liquid certainty, amplifying every thought, magnifying every pang of guilt and resentment. She remembered the laughter of her mother, the gentle guidance of the kami, and the subtle, maddening way Susanoo had flung chaos like a stone skipping across calm water. It was not merely anger she felt. It was the dissonance between love and betrayal, between duty and desire. She traced her fingers along the jagged stone wall and imagined the sun's rays reaching out, coaxing her into the world. But she could not move. She had become both prisoner and warden of her own brilliance. As she pondered, subtle hints of life began to stir beyond the cave's dark threshold. Tiny sounds, almost imperceptible, threaded through the silence. The scrape of pebbles shifting, the delicate snap of twigs, the whisper of wind against leaves. Spirits, those unnoticed tenders of life, sensed the imbalance and gathered cautiously at the edges of the mortal world. They shimmered faintly, like reflections on black water, carrying with them the promise of subtle intervention. Some hovered near streams, coaxing water to flow, while others rustled through crops, urging green shoots to rise despite the sun's absence. Even in her self-imposed exile, Amaterasu could feel these faint tendrils of devotion, a reminder that she was never entirely alone, even when she had withdrawn from everything she had created. Nightly, the moon attempted to cast silver consolation across the land, but even its glow seemed reluctant, as if it feared offending the sun goddess. Shadows gathered in corners, curling around stones, climbing trees, sliding along rooftops. Humans whispered tales of gods, angry and capricious, children shivering under blankets, while elders muttered prayers that had lost their warmth. The cold was pervasive, sinking into bones, carrying the sharp scent of dried leaves, moss, and the faint metallic tang of stagnant air. Every breath drawn was an effort, every heartbeat a reminder that life persisted, but barely. The tension was palpable in the world and among the heavens alike. Minor gods moved restlessly, pacing invisible corridors, glancing skyward for signs of return. The very mountains seemed to hunch, shading valleys in deeper gloom, while rivers slowed as if they, too, mourned the sun's absence. Insects, normally busy and insistent, remained frozen, antennae trembling against the chill. Even the sacred cranes, messengers of hope and longevity, perched quietly, heads tucked, waiting for the first signal that light might return. The natural order had not yet succumbed entirely, but it quivered on a knife's edge. Amaterasu's solitude was not merely physical, but spiritual. The cave seemed alive, aware of her presence, echoing her mood with every shift of shadow and reflection of her radiant form. Stalactites glimmered faintly, catching minuscule hints of light that her body radiated, though she kept it dim, almost suffocating herself in darkness. Her reflection on the smooth stone floors reminded her of both her power and her fragility, and a impossible paradox that weighed heavier with each passing moment. Time stretched, dilated, folded in upon itself, making hours feel like centuries, and centuries like moments. Each tick of the unseen cosmic clock was magnified, each sigh of the earth amplified into a symphony of longing. Yet even in this oppressive silence, a quiet yearning began to seep into her awareness. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a flutter of curiosity at the periphery of thought. Perhaps it came from memories, the warmth of the world, the laughter of spirits, the rustle of grass beneath a human foot. Perhaps it came from something deeper, a recognition that isolation could not last forever, that anger and retreat, while powerful, were insufficient to sustain the world she had vowed to nurture. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in the armor of her withdrawal, a fissure through which light might someday seep again. Outside, the world held its breath. Rivers waited to sparkle, leaves waited to quiver, and humans waited, instinctively, for a sign. Even Susanoo, reckless and tumultuous, felt the weight of the silence pressing against him, a tension so potent it rattled the very edges of his pride. Somewhere deep in the forests and plains, the faint stirrings of intervention began to form, as if the world itself recognized that the goddess's return was not merely desirable, but essential. And in that shadowed pause, the cosmos prepared. The stage for reconciliation was being set with invisible hands, guided by spirits both playful and determined. Each moment of silence, every shivering leaf, every trembling heartbeat built the anticipation toward a motion that could no longer be delayed. Amaterasu, radiant yet withdrawn, held the key to the world's rebirth, though she did not yet know it. The pause was deep, thick with tension, but not eternal. Light, as it always does, waits only briefly before returning, drawn by life, laughter, and the unyielding pulse of the universe. Whispers traveled through the heavens like ripples spreading across a still pond. They slid between clouds, threaded beneath arching tree limbs, and danced along the edges of shrines that trembled with a quiet fear. The absence of sunlight had grown unbearable, casting the world into a perpetual twilight that strained the balance between life and decay. Rice fields shimmered weakly with frost, their stalks wilting in exhaustion, and the sacred rivers, that once carried shimmering reflections now offered only dull shadows, as though they had forgotten how to sparkle. Mortals murmured their prayers in hushed tones, breath clouding in cold air, hands clutching beads worn smooth by worry. The realm between heaven and earth felt thinner, stretched taut as a drumskin about to tear. Far above this anxious world, within a clearing formed by constellations and clouds, the great kami began to gather. Their arrival stirred the atmosphere, bending gusts of wind into spiraling currents, setting leaves to fluttering like anxious wings. Robes of shimmering silk swayed around ethereal bodies, their colors shifting like sunrise, bleeding slowly into dusk. Incense smoke curled in delicate spirals around hovering lantern flames, filling the air with a fragrance reminiscent of cedar bark, blooming lotus, and ancient ritual. Every step the kami took resonated with a subtle music, tiny chimes, whispering flutes, and deep thrumming pulses that echoed across the sky. At the center of the clearing stood Takami Musubi, ancient and stern, his expression carved from timeless stone. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting both wisdom and exhaustion. And when he spoke, his voice was like the shifting of mountains, deep, resonant, and unyielding. Amaterasu's light has fled from the world, he proclaimed, each word falling heavily like stones tossed into a silent pool. Her absence weakens all realms. Our duty demands action. Murmurs followed, a chorus of concern that swelled and fell like ocean tides. Younger spirits shuffled restlessly, wings twitching. Elder kami pressed lips into thin lines, their faces drawn taut with the strain of centuries of cosmic stewardship. Concern crackled through the gathering like static, small, sharp, and relentless. Ame no Uzume stepped forward, eyes bright as stars caught in dew. Joy clung to her like perfume, yet now it simmered with urgency. Her laughter normally rolled like summer thunder, but today it settled quietly, coiled beneath her ribs. We must coax her from her sorrow, she said, voice light as silk, fluttering in a storm. Not with scolding, not with fear, only with the reminder that light belongs, not within stone, but upon skin and earth and water. Her filigreed bracelets chimed as she gestured, beads sparkling like captured dawn. Spirits turned their faces toward her, drawn by her energy, as though moths gathering near a flame. She imagined Amaterasu curled deep within the cave, light dimmed by grief's heavy blanket, her radiance muffled beneath stone and solitude. Such pain demanded not reprimand, but renewal. Standing opposite Uzume was Susanoo, broad-shouldered, tempest-bound, his presence a tension of storm clouds rolling against cliff faces. His hair tumbled like dark thunderheads. His expression caught somewhere between guilt and defiance. Lightning pulsed along his arms, quick and sharp, betraying his inner turmoil. He crossed them over his chest, a barrier forged from pride and shame. This is not solely her doing, Susanoo muttered, though the weight of his voice confessed everything he wished to deny. My actions, they were not meant to drive her away. The murmurs sharpened into whispers. His rage had shattered sacred boundaries, uprooted fields, and tested patience beyond reason. Yet remorse flickered in his eyes like a lone spark in an endless storm. He exhaled as though releasing centuries of stubbornness, shoulders loosening by a fraction beneath the weight of his guilt. Takami Musubi's gaze landed on him, pinning him like a nail to wood. Intent does not absolve harm. Restoration requires humility. Suzanu's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, slow, deliberate, heavy. A chorus of lesser spirits hovered behind him, wind sprites swirling like scraps of silk caught in a breeze, river guardians shimmering with translucent luminescence, rippling across their shoulders like molten glass. Their apprehension clung to them like mist. Even they understood. The balance of creation teetered. Nearby, Tsukuyomi drifted with measured grace, moonlight pooling at his feet. Cold elegance framed his face, though something deeper, a shadow of regret, lingered behind calm eyes. He and Amaterasu had once moved together in cosmic rhythm, sun and moon in sacred dance. Now their separation stained the heavens. "We cannot force her," he said, tone smooth yet sharp as polished obsidian. Coercion breeds deeper wounds. Uzume's lips curled with mischievous warmth. Force? No. Persuasion? Certainly. Sometimes the world needs a spark of laughter to ignite courage. Her voice jingled with playful confidence, though beneath it lay steel, the clarity of one who understood sorrow intimately. The council debated with rising intensity, voices layered atop one another like storm clouds splitting open. Heated words clashed with cold logic. Thoughtful suggestions collided with wild ideas. All the while, celestial winds perked their ears against the tension, carrying the discussion across temple roofs and sacred groves down below. Mortals felt the shift, glancing skyward with sudden hope. Finally, silence fell. Not the empty hush of grief, but the heavy, anticipatory quiet before dawn gathers itself. A plan had taken shape in the collective heart of the kami, a dance, a celebration, a mirror, a trick woven not from deceit, but from joy. Laughter would coax the cave's door. Wonder would lure Amaterasu's curiosity. They would reflect her own beauty back to her, reminding her of the love she had once spread without restraint. As preparations began, the clearing exploded into movement. Spirits soared through the air, scattering trails of light like sparks from flint. Artisans conjured mirrors, polished to radiant shine, their surfaces rippling with captured starlight. Musicians summoned drums, whose skins thrummed with ancient thunder, flutes carved from wind-bent bamboo, and bells forged from forgotten storms. The scent of blooming sakura petals flooded the space, sweetness thick and intoxicating. Suzanu remained, apart from the frenzy, palms pressed to his forehead, eyes closed. Remorse coiled through him like smoke, heavy, acrid. Memories flashed. The destruction, the shouting, the way Amaterasu's face had crumpled before retreating. He leaned against a stone pillar carved with the histories of gods, tracing grooves worn deeper than centuries. His power trembled beneath his skin, but he tightened his fists as if containing a typhoon. Uzume approached him quietly, steps soft as moth wings. Her eyes gleamed with compassion. "You will have your chance," she murmured. "When she emerges, Speak not of excuses, but of truth. He swallowed hard, throat dry as old parchment. And if she refuses to forgive me, Uzume offered a small, gentle smile, then become someone she one day could, below them, in the mortal realm. Cessation threatened life's every rhythm. Children gathered beneath flickering torches, gazing up at starless skies, searching for warmth on their cold faces. Villagers sipped soup, flavored only with memory, no herbs to season the broth, no sunlight to nourish the crops. Shrines trembled with prayers offered by trembling hands. Even the animals felt desperation. Rabbits shivered in burrows, unable to sense day or night. Cranes stood motionless near frozen lakes, waiting for the sun's protective tapestry. All the while, the kami worked, mirrors strategically angled to capture even the faintest glimmer, instruments tuned to resonate with the heartbeat of joy. Uzum practiced footwork, each stomp sending ripples of mischief into the soil. Musicians crafted rhythms of warmth and invitation. Tsukuyomi raised his face to the void and whispered ancient words. Weaving moonlight into silk threads, he draped them across the clearing, forming a net of soft silver luminescence. A pathway, he explained, voice hushed, something gentle to follow. Curiosity forms bridges pride cannot. Takami Masubi watched the sky darken further, jaw tightening. Whatever unfolds, he murmured, the world will not survive another season of shadow. At the far edge of the clearing, unseen by most, a small childlike spirit cupped their hands around a faint glow, a tiny orb of stored sunlight harvested from memory. Their giggle chimed like wind through chimes. Hope could take many shapes, even small ones. And all of this, every step, every plan, every subtle nod, moved toward a single destination, Amano Iwato, the cave where the sun goddess hid, nursing wounds no light could soothe. The gathering completed their preparations as celestial winds swirled, carrying the scent of promise, the taste of laughter, the faint hum of courage gathering its breath. The dance would begin soon. Night pooled like ink across the folds of the world. The cave of Amano Iwato sat quiet and unmoving, a black seam in the face of the mountain, stitched shut by sorrow and pride. Frost glittered along its edges, clinging like cold breath caught in still air. The goddess within breathed evenly, though tension bloomed beneath her sternum like coiled thunder. Each inhalation thickened the silence. Each exhalation carved hollows in the dark. Outside, the first murmurs of movement stirred. Ame no Uzume approached the cave's entrance with the grace of a comet descending, her feet skimming soil still cold from the absence of sunlight. Her garments fluttered like banners of dawn, bright threads woven from laughter, hope, and quiet mischief. Delicate bells dangled from her wrists and ankles, chiming with soft, crystalline clarity. Spirits gathered in the clearing, their ethereal bodies shimmering faintly, some shaped like streaks of wind, others like ripples of water. They formed a loose circle, holding their breath as Uzume took her place before the sealed stone. Musicians stood ready, instruments poised. Drums of stretched celestial hide thrummed with sound as hands hovered above them. Flutes carved from bone and bamboo quivered beneath anxious fingers. Rattles forged from seed pods, and river stones rattled softly in the wind. A hush descended, anticipation thick enough to taste. The air shivered, electric with possibility. Uzume exhaled, then slammed her foot against the ground. The impact reverberated through the forest, sending leaves trembling. A drumbeat answered, low and slow, pulsing like a heartbeat, awakening after a long sleep. She spun sharply, bells singing, garments swirling in a blur of shifting color. Her laughter burst forth, warm and bright, ringing against stone, like water splashing on hot metal. She stomped again. Another drum answered, louder this time. Then a third. Rhythm blossomed, scattering shadows, like startled birds. Within the cave, Amaterasu stiffened. The sound pierced the veil of silence enveloping her, slitting it like a blade. She pressed a palm against the wall, stone cool beneath her touch. Her pulse quickened, tingling through her fingertips. Laughter? Music? Impossible. The world outside should have been mourning, not celebrating. Yet the sounds persisted, lively, unruly, refusing to bow beneath shadow. Uzume's dance grew wilder. She twisted, bent, and leapt, her body folding into impossible shapes. Sweat glistened across her brow. Catching faint reflections of starlight, she tore leaves from nearby branches and scattered them across the clearing, their fragrance sharp and green. Spirits gasped and giggled, their voices chiming like wind bells shaken in sudden gusts. Music swelled, each beat a spark struck against flint. With every stomp, the earth groaned and cracked, releasing faint warmth stored deep within stone. The clearing brightened, not with sunlight, but with the glow of divine joy. Uzume threw her head back, laughter pouring raw and unrestrained. Her bells chimed feverishly. Musicians seized the momentum, fingers flying across drums and strings, pushing the world toward frenzy. Energy surged through the clearing like a rising tide. Amaterasu felt heat lapping at her ankles, rolling through the cave. She paced, golden, hair trailing behind her like comet tails, her brows knit, confusion prickling her senses. Could the world truly celebrate while she suffered? She stepped closer to the cave entrance, hesitant but drawn by curiosity that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her radiance, dulled by grief, flickered. Outside, Yoshinuma, the rowdiest of the wind spirits, whistled and swooped along the ground, fanning sparks of laughter. River sprites splashed tiny fountains of shimmering water into the air, droplets hanging suspended like glass beads. Uzumi danced harder, chest heaving, cheeks flushed, movements wild enough to flirt with chaos, but precise enough to maintain control. She stripped off parts of her garment, revealing swirling tattoos of constellations and rivers etched across her skin. Gasps rippled through the assembled kami. Amaterasu heard them as muffled echoes through stone. What are they doing? She whispered to the darkness. She crept closer, warmth brushing her cheeks. Her hand found the rough edge of the boulder, sealing the cave. She pressed her eye to a small crack. The sight hit her like a lightning strike. Kami danced. Spirits spun. The clearing pulsed with heat and humor. Lantern flames bloomed like flowers. Her absence had not frozen the world completely. Pockets of joy, persisted like embers, smoldering stubbornly in ash. Her chest tightened, hurt, anger, bewilderment, longing. Above the revelry, mirrors glinted, suspended by ropes woven from vine and moonlight. They reflected bits of Uzumi's light and the shimmer of spirits. Each reflected shard spun outward across the clearing in shimmering arcs, radiance scattered, captured, and recaptured in a dance of reflection. The mirrors were angled deliberately toward the cave. Rays ricocheted into its mouth, slipping through cracks like curious fingers. Amaterasu flinched as fragments of light struck her face. It was her light, warm, familiar, painfully comforting. She reached out involuntarily, fingers brushing the glow as if touching memory. Outside, Uzume stumbled theatrically, falling onto her back. The clearing erupted into laughter. Kami clutched their sides. Even Tsukuyomi cracked a rare smile, eyes glowing with silver amusement. Susanoo watched from the shadows, heart twisted with guilt and hope, regret and awe. Uzume leapt to her feet, grinning as if she held the sun captive in her mouth. "Behold," she cried, "a goddess more radiant than any star." She gestured toward one of the mirrors angled toward the cave mouth. Amaterasu blinked, caught by the sight. Through the reflection, she saw herself, not as she felt, dim and weary, but as she appeared, luminous, regal, woven from gold and morning. Her breath caught. Was this truly how the world still saw her? Her fingers trembled against stone. The crowd roared approval. Uzumi spun toward the cave. "Come and see the goddess who outshines all heavens," she teased, voice like silver bells ringing across frozen lakes. Amaterasu's heart hammered. She wanted to withdraw. She wanted to step forward. Curiosity clawed at the walls of her exile. One step whispered the cave's echo. She leaned forward. Her foot left shadow and touched the cave's threshold. Warmth pressed against her skin. A murmur rippled through the gathering as her fingers curled around the cave's edge. Her golden hair spilled outward in soft waves, illuminating the boulder like liquid dawn. The clearing froze, every spirit holding breath, every drum suspended mid-beat. Then Uzume stomped the ground, and music exploded again, pulling the world back into motion. The mirror angled perfectly, catching Amaterasu's eye, reflecting her beauty with reverence and awe. She took a step, then another. The boulder shifted. Light spilled across the clearing, like wine poured across silk. Amaterasu emerged. Gasps filled the air. Flowers blossomed instantly at her feet. Frost melted into rivulets of cool water. Birds burst into song, voices bright and trembling with relief. The entire clearing seemed to exhale. Uzume bowed deeply. "Welcome home, Lady of the Dawn." For the first time in endless silence, Amaterasu smiled. Small, fragile, luminous. The world changed shape around that smile. Sunlight rushed back into the world as if held behind a dam too long. The first rays burst through the canopy, splashing across leaves like molten gold. Steam curled upward from icy ground, dancing in thin spirals. Dew became diamonds, burning, bright, before slipping into vapor. Every living thing seemed to draw a collective breath. A sigh rippled across the land, wind through reeds, wings through still air. petals unfurling in sudden bloom. Amaterasu stood at the threshold, radiant yet tremulous. Her skin thrummed with energy, a fine vibration trapped beneath her ribs. The cave's darkness clung to her ankles like invisible ink, reluctant to release its hold. She glanced downward. Shadows fled from her presence, dissolving beneath her luminous gaze. Yet some small sliver of doubt hooked quietly beneath her sternum. Uzumi's bells jingled softly, bringing attention back to the gathered kami. "Goddess of light," she murmured. Her tone held reverence, mischief subdued beneath unexpected tenderness. "Your world missed you." A murmur of agreement rippled outward. Grass spirits knelt low, their blades bent like supplicants. River sprites pressed palms of shimmering water to their chests. The drum's rhythm faded into softer tremors, mimicking heartbeat and breath. A hush descended, gentle and reverent. Amaterasu inhaled. Warm air entered her lungs, heavy with resin, crushed leaves, ember smoke, and moon-dried silk. Her body recognized each fragrance, the perfumes of celebration, toil, and devotion. Memories flooded her senses, fields of rice bending in storms, festivals beneath lantern strings, children's laughter woven into evening air. She swallowed, throat tightening. Susanoo stepped forward, eyes lowered, voice steady, though brittle at the edges. "Sister." He paused. The word trembled like a leaf on thin stem. "I failed you. My arrogance poisoned joy, and your sorrow became the world's burden." His jaw clenched. He forced his gaze upward, meeting sunlight without flinching. "I ask forgiveness." It came out quiet, raw, aching. For a heartbeat, silence swelled. Amaterasu's gaze softened, though hurt simmered beneath the surface. "Your storms tore my fields," she replied gently, "but grief blinded my return. We both must unbind what was broken." Light pulsed through the clearing like slow thunder, seeking balance. Uzume raised her arms. "Balance begins now," she declared. "Reflection guides, remembrance." She gestured toward the suspended mirrors. They glimmered like stars caught in spider silk, each one angled to catch sunlight and scatter it into arcs of brilliance. Kami lifted ropes, adjusting tension until beams crisscrossed the clearing in a lattice of shimmering lines. Where the beams intersected, tiny motes of gold flared, memory seeds drifting gently downward before dissolving into air. Amaterasu's breath hitched. Within each mote flashed fragmented images, forests burning, then regrowing, villagers singing, storms passing, leaving fertile soil in their wake. The world changed, wound itself around both destruction and renewal. She lifted a hand. A mote settled against her palm like a warm tear. The ground beneath her feet responded. Flowers sprung upward, thin stems curling toward her ankles like children seeking comfort. Their petals opened in slow spirals, releasing scents of honey, sun-warmed straw, and crisp dawn. The clearing brightened further. Shadows retreated in sheets, peeling themselves from bark and stone. Tsukuyomi stepped beside her, face composed, silver cloak whispering like moonlit waves. "Your absence taught cycles," he murmured. "Even darkness must learn its limits." His voice held neither apology nor accusation, only reflection. Amaterasu nodded, accepting truth without resistance. The mirrors shifted again. This time their beams converged upon a single obsidian disc at the clearing center. The stone rippled like ink disturbed by a fingertip. Slowly, an image formed upon its surface. Villagers toiled beneath gray skies, faces drawn and weary. Crops withered, rivers thinned. Children pressed palms to cracked earth, whispering prayers. Amaterasu's chest constricted. She reached toward the surface instinctively, but Tsukuyomi restrained her wrist gently. "See first," he whispered. "Healing must begin from understanding, not impulse." She exhaled, steadying. Shadows pooled around the image's edges, coiling like hungry serpents. Yet as she watched, faint tendrils of light broke through clouds, touching soil, sparking sprouts where roots had retained hope. The villagers' eyes brightened. They lifted their heads. They worked harder, hands blistered but determined. The obsidian disc throbbed softly. Heartbeat, earthbeat, world beat. Susanoo stepped forward again, voice low. "The world endured. Your return strengthens what survived." His gaze brimmed with something rawer than regret, awe. The mirrors chimed as wind gusted. Strands of reflected radiance braided themselves into thin, luminescent threads hovering above the clearing. Uzume gestured, and Kami seized the threads, weaving them into a tapestry suspended between two ancient cedars. Images pulsed across its surface. Laughter returned to festivals. Winter softened its bite. River currents thickened, fish flickering like living silver. Amaterasu approached, fingertips grazing the tapestry. Each image carried quiet truth. Healing requires movement, not stasis. She felt the cave's darkness dissolve from her heels, evaporating like mist. Her shoulders lifted, spine elongating, as burden shed itself in strands. Uzume's bells jingled again. "Now," she breathed. "Reflect." A final mirror lowered from above, its frame forged from hardened starlight. It hovered before Amaterasu, angled slightly downward. She gazed into herself, not merely beauty, depth, light layered with fracture lines, each mended by time, eyes shimmering with grief and grace intertwined, hair threaded with warmth and fatigue. This was not the unshaken goddess who once commanded the sky without question. This was someone tempered by shadow, textured by sorrow, awakened by silence. Her reflection bowed to her. She bowed back. A deep hum rolled through soil. Every spirit lowered to one knee. Even wind stillness fell like velvet. "From this moment forward," Amaterasu declared, voice resonant, "light will not abandon the world so easily. I will walk among cycles, not above them." The world brightened, not painfully, but expansively. Soft warmth spilled into roots and marrow. Rivers thickened. Sprites laughed. Frost fled. Susanoo bowed deeply, forehead touching earth. Tsukuyomi followed. Uzume simply grinned, pride bright as sunrise. The mirrors retracted upward, folding light into themselves like wings. Only ambient radiance remained, gentle and golden. As the ceremony faded, Amaterasu lifted her face to sky, blue deepening toward azure. Her heart tilted open, sunlight flowing outward and inward in equal measure. Behind her, the cave mouth crumbled silently, stone turning to dust that glittered before dissolving completely. No shadow remained to claim her. Forward was the only direction left. The return of sunlight did not arrive all at once. It unfurled. After the celebration, faded into quiet murmurs and soft laughter. The forest thinned into silence, the kind of silence that holds breath rather than emptiness. The clearing gradually loosened, spirits drifting like curling smoke toward unseen tasks. The mirrors retracted into the canopy, vanishing among branches as if they had always been part of the leaves themselves. Only faint motes of gold drifted down, dissolving before touching the ground. Amaterasu stood alone at the threshold's ghost, where the cave once sealed her from the world. The stone dust glimmered on her bare feet like mica, sparkling between each toe. Her skin tingled with residual warmth from ceremony and memory alike. The earth beneath her pulsed in slow rhythm, a heartbeat ancient and willing, nudging gently against her soles. She closed her eyes and inhaled. Warmth filled her from hips to crown, threaded with scents of cedar resin, milkweed, and the faint metallic taste of dawn rising. Her pulse synchronized with the world's. She exhaled, and the air trembled in reply. When she opened her eyes, the forest had changed. Threads, not physical, but perceptible, stretched between leaf and soil, frost and root, cloud and water. They glittered faintly, visible only to divine perception. Each thread vibrated with possibility. Some thrummed bright with future harvests. Others dimmed beneath the weight of coming droughts. It was tapestry undone, weft unwoven, awaiting hand and vision. Amaterasu lifted her palm. A thread snapped into focus, wrapping gently around her finger. The vibration hummed along her skin. Summer's warmth, cicada songs, amber fields of rice bending beneath invisible hands. She smiled softly. The world had missed her guidance. A whisper of footsteps approached. She did not turn. Energy alone identified their owner. Tsukuyomi emerged from behind a cedar. His silver cloak trailed in languid ribbons, pooling moonlight across moss. Cycles frayed in your absence, he murmured. Night overstepped its boundaries. Winter lingered. Tides surged unpredictably. The balance awaits reweaving. Amaterasu nodded. Balance cannot be commanded. It must be invited. He tilted his head, curiosity flickering. And will you invite forgiveness within yourself? She said nothing. Silence opened like a valley between them, wide but crossable. Tsukuyomi bowed his head and withdrew into shifting shadow, leaving her alone amid vibrating threads. She turned toward the east, where the sky bruised from violet into gold. Dawn crawled upward like warm liquid, stretching its limbs after a long confinement. She felt it pull gently on her shoulders, urging movement. She walked. Her path wound through thickets of yamabuki blossoms, their yellow petals soft like pressed velvet. Wind carried their scent, honeyed, sweet, tinged with regret. Bees hummed in slow circles, still adjusting to sudden abundance. As she moved, threads followed, clustering around her wrists and ankles. They tugged gently, eager to be woven. She raised both hands and began. Her fingers danced through air, plucking strands of potential and looping them through invisible spindles. Energy rippled outward, clouds above twisted into spirals, forming great seasonal arcs. Rainfall scheduled, storms tamed, winds distributed along future coastlines. The world sighed under her touch, tension easing. With each weave, memories flickered in her peripheral vision. Children chasing fireflies, rice terraces shimmering like descending stairs of green, lantern parades threading through twilight, joy braided seamlessly with loss. She felt every harvest that never occurred during her absence, every family left cold through unusually long winter. Shame curled through her ribs, but she did not recoil from it. Weaving required confronting fray. She reached upward, grasping a cold strand threaded with reading nights, pale frost, silence, winter. It bowed beneath her touch. She wove it narrower, shorter, brisk, but not cruel. In response, stars above clustered into tighter constellations, piercing velvet sky with clarity. Another thread pulsed crimson, summer heat. She widened it slightly, ensuring crops would dry adequately without scalding roots. The tapestry thickened. Onward, the forest parted to reveal a vast plateau carved from pale stone. At its center stood an ancient loom, half fossil, half shrine. Its beams had grown from living oak centuries ago. Vines wound around its legs, blossoms sprouting where wood intersected earth. Threads already stretched between its braces, shimmering spectral forms waiting instruction. Amaterasu approached, heart beating steady. Her bare feet left faint impressions of golden dust. She placed both hands on the loom's crossbar. It shivered beneath her touch, recognizing its keeper. Light gathered at her fingertips, liquid, molten, threading itself through warp and weft. The loom responded, emitting a deep hum, like distant thunder rumbling beneath stone. Each shuttle pass sent ripples across sky. Clouds shifted shape. Coastlines shivered into new curvature. Mountain roots deepened imperceptibly. Her breath synced to the shuttle's rhythm. In, summer warmth. Out, autumn harvest. She wove drought into rain, famine into feast, grief into resilience. Golden threads thickened where communities would thrive. Darker fibers tightened around storms. But she did not eliminate them. Too gentle a world frays under complacency. Across the plateau, small spirit children gathered. Their faces glowed like candle flames. They watched in silence, hands clasped. Their bodies flickered translucent, shaped by hope and fear equal measure. One stepped forward, eyes enormous. "Lady Sun," he whispered, voice granular as mica dust. "What of sorrow?" Amaterasu paused, shuttle hovering mid-air. "Sorrow cannot be removed," she replied softly, "but it can be spaced, stretched, thin through time rather than crushing all at once." She wove a narrow thread of midnight blue, spacing it among gold and green. The child's eyes widened as sorrow diluted, evolving from catastrophe into learning. The loom hummed in approval. Hours blurred into moments. Shadows stretched, then shortened. Time folded around her wrists, her hair, her spine. She existed both inside and outside it, weaving not only what would be, but what could have been and never must be again. When her shoulders ached, she did not stop. Divinity, like harvest, demanded endurance, not convenience. At last she paused, exhaling. The tapestry shimmered, coiling upward into the sky like a banner catching wind. It unfurled across the horizon. Colors pulsed across nations unseen, verdant, greens, amber golds, cool blues, each thread aligned with river course, mountain pass, migratory wingbeat, cycles restored. But emptiness tugged at her chest, something missing. She examined her work, seasons balanced, harvest scheduled, tides aligned, storms tempered, winters shortened, summers gentle. Yet something pulsed hollow through the weave. Stillness. The tapestry lacked joy's spontaneity. She took a bright thread, festivals. She wove it loosely, allowing laughter to bloom unscheduled. Lantern nights drifted into pattern like drifting petals. Music seeded itself into random villages. Fireworks blossomed across oceans, reflecting off water with ephemeral beauty. At last, she smiled. The loom's hum lowered into contented purr. Threads anchored themselves into riverbeds, glacier cores, mountain roots. Everywhere, the world exhaled relief, but the plateau still held unfinished business. A cluster of threads hovered in static pulse, futures uncertain, tangled, each thread knotted around a memory of her absence. Abandoned shrine gates, silent bells, dust-covered prayer offerings left unanswered. Her throat tightened, regret pooled. She reached for the threads gently. They resisted. At their center pulsed a single knot, abandonment. Rather than severing it, she pulled it apart slowly, finger by finger, breath by breath. Threads loosened, revealing resilience. Beneath, villagers who survived cruel winters grew stronger. Children who waited learned patience. Communities shared warmth when the sun forsook them. She wove resilience into festivals, patience into harvest, community into crisis. The tapestry brightened. She stepped back and froze. Beneath the loom, a thin crack snaked across stone. Through its fissure, darkness stirred. Not malevolent, but hungry. It pulsed like heartbeat withheld. The absence she left behind created voids. Not all filled with resilience, some filled with fear and doctrine, twisted by cold desperation. A thin black thread wriggled, seeking space. Amaterasu reached for it. It snapped back, venomous like struck serpent. This cycle she could not weave away. She narrowed her eyes. "You will not dominate," she whispered. But to remove it entirely would stagnate growth. Fear teaches caution. Desperation teaches innovation. Hardship shapes story. She wove the shadow thread thin, spacing it between festivals and harvests, misfortune and resilience balancing each other. Darkness accepted its reduced territory, coiling into quiet submission. The plateau exhaled. Amaterasu stepped back, hands trembling. Her knuckles glowed faint red. Divinity sustained, but did not prevent exhaustion, born of emotional labor. A soft voice behind her whispered, "You wove mercy." She turned. Uzume stood near the plateau's edge, bells silent, her grin absent, replaced by solemn pride. Mercy, Amaterasu corrected gently, but not indulgence. Uzume nodded. Cycles require contrast. Together, they watched the sky banner fade into wind and soil. Threads dissolved into invisible pathways, guiding rivers and hearts alike. Amaterasu's body swayed. Uzume steadied her. "You gave too much," the trickster murmured. "I gave enough," Amaterasu whispered back. The world thrummed, fuller now, richer. A final thread hovered before her eyes, small, bright, trembling. She touched it, mortality's hope. She wove it near dawn, where light first touches horizon. It pulsed, then slipped free, traveling toward villages far below. With work complete, the loom's beams creaked softly, folding into dormant sleep. Vines released their blossoms. Spirit children bowed. Amaterasu stepped off the plateau's edge and into the air. Dense warmth caught her, currents lifting her gently downward. Below, forests parted, rivers brightened, mountains straightened their shoulders. She drifted like falling sunlight, landing lightly atop moss. The plateau vanished behind her, swallowed by twilight. In her chest, a quiet ache remained, but not hollow, a promise waiting its hour. She walked into the world, carrying cycles woven through her ribs, each heartbeat a shuttle pass, binding future to past. Forward pulled, and she followed. Morning seeped across the horizon like melted amber. Hills glowed beneath its advance, dew steaming into glittering mist. Birds pulsed upward in spiraling arcs, wings brushing wavelengths that thrummed in deliberate cadence, an orchestra of feathers and breath. From the canopy's edge, countless eyes blinked, reflecting dawn's arrival back at its source. Amaterasu felt every reflection. Light threaded outward through her chest, pouring into moss, seeped through fog, struck stone, refracted through river glass. Each contact echoed back along invisible nerves woven through her ribs. Every shimmer became sensation. Each tiny reflection carried a whisper, a sprout awakening, a frost retreating, a child's eyelid fluttering under dreams of lantern festivals. She inhaled, and the world's pulse raced down her spine, electric and insistent. She pressed fingertips to sternum, feeling warmth shimmer outward. Her breath tremored. It was not pain, just weight, compressing like accumulated stories, layered brick thick across her shoulders. Beneath the surface of her skin, light coiled and uncoiled in restless spirals, each loop vibrating a distinct frequency. Summer storms, winter glints, festival laughter, hunger's shadow. She took her first step of the day. Soil beneath her foot shifted in response, adjusting moisture content infinitesimally to accommodate root networks newly revived. A pine guardian overhead altered the density of needles to filter correct sunlight intensity. Each micro adjustment fed data back into her bloodstream. Her pulse stuttered once, then steadied, absorbing information that surged like tidewater at spring moon. Her eyelids fluttered. She exhaled, but the air around her thickened, unwilling to leave. Sensing goddess presence, wind knelt, weightless yet deferential. Every breeze waited her command. "Not command," she murmured. "Guidance." She walked deeper into the forest, and sensitivity sharpened rather than faded. Every shifting leaf edge radiated pressure like delicate teeth against her auricles. Cicada chirps mapped humidity curves against her spine. River song pulled at her ankles, beckoning, pleading. Bodies of water always begged. They remembered drought. Her heart tightened. She envisioned lowering rainfall in distant fields to prevent rot. Immediately, tension rippled along 1,000 streambeds. Tiny panicked vibrations shuddered against her calves. She steadied breath, softening in tension. The sensations eased, but lingered. Responsibility never evaporated completely. Each strand of light that emanated from her birthed 2 returns. One of gratitude, one of need. They braided together and traced up her veins. A constant chorus of pleas whispered beneath bone. She approached a clearing where foxfire spirits danced in slow spirals, tails emitting phosphorescent curls. They bowed when she entered, but their flames flickered strangely, thin, quivering at edges. Hungry, your heat waned, she observed. A spirit child nodded, voice crackling like burning cedar. The long winter took too much. We lost siblings. A pulse of guilt cracked across her sternum like lightning. She adjusted cycle threads internally. A minute shift in temperature gradients across mountainous ridges, allowing underground glow moss to flourish, feeding foxfire with subterranean warmth. Relief swept across the clearing like rain through dry wheat, and with it, gratitude, radiant, soft, overwhelming. It struck her diaphragm like a too deep inhalation. She staggered backward, gripping a cedar trunk, bark imprinted against her palm, leaving textured grooves. She whispered, too much at once. The foxfire dimmed, their flames respectfully, their joy turning gentle, muted. Even gratitude weighed. She walked onward. Sun climbed higher. With it came data. Evaporation rates, chlorophyll expansion curves, wingbeat frequencies monitoring migration patterns. Each wave of information brushed against her pupils, stretching them wide. She pressed fingers to her temples. Behind bone, colors burst, greens spiraling into blues, edges sharpening beyond mortal tolerance. Time dilated, fracturing into interwoven seconds. For a heartbeat, she saw tomorrow's drought. For another, next year's festival harvest. 5 heartbeats later, a river god swelling with rage, then subsiding into patience. It all stacked into sensory strata. She forced breath steady. Presence required constraint. She reached a hillside where rice paddies terraced down like steps, carved in jade. Water shimmered across them in thin glazes, catching sunlight into mirrored hexagons. Each reflection pinged against her sternum, pressing emotion like fingerprints. Farmers knelt in fields far below, ankle-deep mud, hands submerged in rootwork. They did not see her. They only felt warmth intensify slightly, encouraging sprout growth. This gratitude arrived as a ripple, subtle and soft, but even subtle ripples layered. She tasted them on her tongue. Salted hope, earthy necessity, a farmer's silent worry about aging parents tightened her chest. A child's wish for festival lanterns pressed behind her eyes. A young girl's grief over a missing sibling throbbed behind knee ligaments. She had missed these currents. She had forgotten their density. Balance, she whispered to herself. But light never balanced. It expanded. She descended toward the paddies, each step heavier than last. Water spirit wisps rose from irrigation channels, bowing gently. Their voices fluttered against her ears. Translucent syllables begging for deeper currents. She granted a slight shift, one droplet per root per hour. In response, gratitude stormed her bloodstream, thick enough to choke. She gasped, knees buckling. A water wisp panicked. "We did not mean no," she breathed, steadying. "Your need is valid. Need, gratitude, fear, desire." They braided upward through her metabolic pathways, wrapping around her heart's two chambers like vines. She straightened and turned. Above, clouds thickened in sudden clusters. Thunderheads gathered, forming swirling tension across atmospheric strata. Her absence left ungoverned pockets of storm hunger. They now sought her attention like neglected children. Their frustration translated into blunt sensation. Migraine throbs behind brow. Pressure lodged beneath sternum. She lifted both hands, palms upward, fingers uncurling. "Not today," she whispered. Storms dispersed reluctantly, moisture diffusing across valleys. Relief flickered through her arteries, thunder export dissolving into distant drizzle. Her nerve endings tingled as each droplet found leaf. The weight eased 1 degree, then retightened. She ascended a ridge and found a shrine gate, abandoned. Paint peeled in long curls. Red faded to rust. Offerings rotted in bowls. Incense ash caked corners. Bells silent. She approached slowly. Her radiance illuminated dust motes, suspended like forgotten prayers. Her stomach tightened. Fear poured from the structure. Fear of abandonment. Fear of irrelevance. She knelt, touching threshold. Stones. They vibrated memories. Years of children giggling. Elders bowing. Rice cakes offered with trembling kindness. These memories struck her diaphragm, stealing breath. Shame rippled outward, thinning her radiance momentarily. She exhaled apology into stone. Light seeped into grain, refreshing pigments, restoring vermilion. Bells jingled once, soft, tentative. Gratitude poured, sharp, vibrant, overwhelming. She jerked upright. Too much. She pressed palm to forehead, teeth clenching. Her nerves misfired with intensity. Pleasure, sorrow, relief, guilt. Each emotion too loud. Overlapping frequencies saturating her chest cavity. She stumbled into shade and sat, back against cedar. Bark pressed ridges into spine, centering. Her internal voice whispered, "You cannot cradle the world all at once." But the world tugged regardless. Bird flight patterns altered overhead. Temperature fluctuations beneath soil radiated warmth spikes at her ankles. Waves along coastlines shifted height patterns against calves. Each variable required modulation. Her shoulders trembled. Her ribs expanded too wide with data. A shadow draped across her vision. Soft, silver. Tsukuyomi crouched beside her. He did not touch. Moonlight rarely intruded without invitation. "You feel everything," he murmured. "All at once." She nodded, jaw tight. "When sealed, silence wrapped me. Now every whisper is thunder." He tilted head. Do you regret returning? Her answer rose instantly. No, but breath wavered. Truth rooted deeper. I regret leaving. Tsukuyomi's eyes softened. Regret is pressure, tension. Release comes through cycles within yourself. She swallowed. Internal cycles, unaddressed. He motioned toward her sternum. You gave the world spacing. Now grant yourself the same. How? Her voice cracked. You space your own sorrow, thread your own shame, weave your empathy into intervals. She closed eyes. Threads materialized along inner eyelids. She grasped one, fear, and spaced it thinly between responsibility. Another, guilt. She wove loosely, leaving room for breath. Joy, she clustered, allowing pleasure pockets to buffer strain. Slowly, internal weight redistributed. Her lungs expanded. Pressure eased enough for ribcage to soften. She opened eyes. Tsukuyomi smiled faintly. Rare, moonlit. You are sun, he whispered. But even sun rests behind clouds. Clouds formed quietly overhead, shading her skin. Sensations dimmed. Relief gushed down her spine. He stood without further words and vanished into silver wind. Amaterasu rose. She stepped forward, toward horizon, toward future's demand. But her breath steadied now. The weight remained, but no longer crushed. It pressed with direction, not chaos. She walked on. Morning bled into the world, through seams she could feel under her fingernails, as though dawn itself required gentle pressure to fully open. Amaterasu stood at the crest of a ridge overlooking distant paddies and villages stitched between valleys, each dwelling cupping their portion of light like bowls collecting rain. The sensation of illumination leaving her was familiar, warm, amber, almost comforting. But today, something tugged back. For the first time since emerging from the cave, she felt an absence where radiance had been. It was small at first, nothing more than a flicker just behind her right eye. But when she extended light toward a village waking below, igniting the glint of dew on rooftops, thickening the warmth in stagnant rooms, lifting the gloomy haze that had hung low for weeks, she felt a memory drain with it, the sound of laughter during a childhood festival, a girl's voice singing under paper lanterns. It vanished so quietly, she almost missed it. A subtle vertigo rippled through her gut. She steadied herself, one palm against a cedar trunk whose bark pulsed rhythmic reassurance. The tree sensed her imbalance, adjusting chlorophyll activity minutely to reduce reflective glare. The gesture comforted her, but did not restore the lost memory. She inhaled deeply, drawing warmth into lungs, but breath felt fractionally thinner when she ignited light again for the valley's fields, coaxing root hairs to absorb nutrients, urging grains toward plumpness. Another sliver vanished, this time the tactile sensation of her mother's ceremonial robe brushing her cheek. She blinked hard, as though she could retrieve the texture by force of will. Nothing returned. A whisper curled through her ribs. Cost. She ignored it and descended the ridge. Soil compacted under each step, its compression exploring her arch and heel with precise tactile maps. Each grain of dirt pressed a story into her nerves. Harvest, drought, insect cycles, and she normally welcomed their quiet voices. But today, her nerves shivered with wrongness. Light should never leave scars in its wake. At the valley's edge, a cluster of children chased foxfire wisps with outstretched hands. Their laughter crisped the air. When they saw her, their eyes widened, and reverent awe melted into joy. They rushed forward, small palms upturned, pleading silently for a blessing. She hesitated. Blessings meant light. Light meant loss. I can spare something small, she told herself. She touched each forehead gently. Tiny bursts of warmth infused their skin, coaxing resilience, sharpening immune defenses, brightening futures by degrees. They squealed and darted away, leaving sparkling footprints that faded into dust. But with each blessing, she felt pieces peel away. The taste of plum wine at a midsummer feast, the warmth of a sibling's hand during first snowfall, the exact shade of twilight reflected in still water. She pressed fingertips to her temple, panic prickling. How much could she lose? Before identity thinned, she walked past the water channels where spirits swirled with anxious ripples. A drought threatened upriver. They begged for release of reserves stored in mountain ice. She opened her chest to channel sunlight into hydraulic warmth, thawing the ice subtly, feeding the river. The spirits dissolved into relieved curls of steam. Something hollowed behind her breastbone. She felt it distinctly, an emotional capacity, evaporating, gone, as though siphoned. She exhaled sharply. Empathy, just a fraction, but noticeable. Where she once would have wept with their relief, she now felt muted warmth. Pressure gathered behind her sternum. She pressed into it with thought, compacting emotional weight to manageable size. But the reduction alarmed her. Diminishment rarely aided gods. Across the valley, a shrine bell chimed thrice, urgent, shrill. She sprinted toward it, light compressing around her ankles, propelling her. Wind coiled behind her spine, trailing echoes like luminous ribbons. When she arrived, villagers knelt around a child, feverish and trembling, sweat matting hair to skull. Their eyes begged silently. Parents clutched each other in terror. She knelt, placing palm on the child's brow. Heat burned her skin. Seeking equilibrium, she drew fever into herself, cooling the child by degrees. The parents sobbed in relief. With that exhale, a substantial chunk of sensation died within her. The rich timbre of festival drums, the memory muted, fading to silence. She reached inward. Nothing, the pattern of the drum beats, once etched in bone and blood, had vanished. A cold tremor traveled along her limbs. She stood abruptly. Villagers bowed in gratitude, unaware of the cost. She forced a smile, radiant enough to hide the hollowing. As she left, sound dampened around her. Cicadas no longer grated her nerves. Wind lost its tonal complexity. Forest hum blurred into vague static. Her senses were thinning. She traveled deeper into woodland groves. Shadows clung to trunks like silk. Every step triggered subtle memory echoes. But those echoes now arrived distorted, colors less saturated, emotions less textured. She clenched her fists. A fox deity melted from undergrowth, 9 tails swaying like candle flames. Its voice slid into existence smooth as lacquer. You shine less brightly today. I give what is needed, she replied, though her voice cracked. The fox deity circled her with clinical interest. Light is never free. Did you forget what was paid last time? Amaterasu stiffened. She had not forgotten. She had avoided remembering. But exile had protected her from cost. Now, every beam depleted something priceless. She exhaled slowly, through nose, steadying. How do I stop the cost? She asked. You cannot, the fox deity replied. You can only choose what you spend. A chill tightened her throat. Choice meant sacrifice. She continued onward, chest heavy. Afternoon light filtered through leaves, splintering into fractal patterns across her arms. Each shard reflected back at her, mapping micro-deficiencies spreading through her nervous system. She analyzed reflexively. Emotional bandwidth reduced by 4%. Auditory discrimination lowered. Tactile memory thinning. At a stream crossing, she found an elderly woman hunched on a rock, grief cascading down her posture like bent bamboo. A urn sat in her lap, ashes of a husband lost to a harsh winter. She whispered a plea, not for resurrection, but for peace in her sleep. Amaterasu hesitated. Peace meant light. Light meant loss. She could not afford more, but suffering radiated from the woman's bones, echoing across valley emotional networks, affecting crop fertility through sorrow resonance. Her responsibility was systemic. She placed a hand on the woman's spine, channeling a quiet warmth, soft, steady, dissolving layers of grief like thawed frost. Relief swelled. The woman exhaled, tension slipping from muscle. She smiled faintly, eyes moist with release. Something tore inside Amaterasu quietly. The memory of her brother gifting her a ceremonial hairpin carved from the moonstone. She reached inward. Void. The hairpin's cool weight against her scalp was gone. Her heart lurched. She stumbled away, pulse staccato. A migraine rippled across cortex as light density rebalanced. The fox deity's words echoed, choose what you spend. But she was not choosing. She was reacting. If she continued, she would vanish piece by piece. She moved through the forest as sunset bled into gold. Shadows lengthened, layered atop one another like folded silk. Storm clouds gathered silently overhead, not from weather hunger, but from imbalance in her emotional field. She clenched her jaw, forcing atmospheric stability. Each stabilization drained micromemories, names of constellations, breeze textures at dawn. She bit back panic, reaching a mountainside shrine dedicated to ancestral scribes. She found scrolls rotting, ink fading, knowledge eroded at edges. She hesitated again, but ignorance spreads like disease. She could not let generations lose their histories. She funneled light into scroll fibers, restoring ink flow, clarifying characters. A cascade of loss followed. Her ability to taste certain fruits, the way plum blossoms smelled at first bloom. She inhaled to confirm. The scent now registered muted. She pressed knuckles against ribs. What defines her if sensation evaporates? Night pressed close, moon rising in silver arcs. Tsukuyomi appeared on a ridge, silent. His gaze weighed everything she refused to say. He stepped forward, placing his palm near, but not on, her cheek. moonlight radiating gentle coolness. You feel it thinning, he murmured. Light burns the wick it rises from. What am I losing? She whispered. Capacity, he answered. Identity is the sum of remembered sensory echoes. Lose enough, and you become illumination. Without self, she swallowed hard. Fear throbbed behind sternum. How do I stop it? You ration your radiance, Tsukuyomi said, quietly, or you learn to pull from beyond yourself. Beyond? She echoed. Reflection, he replied. Mirrors can return light to you if angled with intention. Teach the world to shine for itself. Her breath caught. Empower others to generate their own radiance rather than feeding them entirely. He stepped back, silver dissolving. Night deepened. Temperature dropped. She forged a plan. Across the valley, she shaped light into subtle threads, connecting villagers to small sparks inside themselves. Curiosity, gratitude, compassion, each thread ignited minuscule flames within them. They glowed faintly, warming crops, easing fevers, thawing grief. Amaterasu monitored the exchange carefully. Their internal sparks brightened environmental conditions, lowering pressure on her. And with this distributed illumination, nothing drained from her. Relief hit like cool rain. She exhaled, knees weakening. This was sustainable, but the effort to teach, to adjust, to align, demanded extraordinary focus. Sweat beaded at her temple. Muscles trembled from cognitive load. She staggered briefly, catching herself against a moss-slick stone. The village glowed gently now, illumination originating from within humans themselves. Lanterns flickered in windows, no longer dependent on her direct beam. She smiled, faint but real. At the edge of woods, a voice crawled up her spine, soft, hungry. Shadows whispered, cost postponed is cost compounded. She turned. Darkness shaped into humanoid silhouette, flickering like smoke. You cannot trick the balance long, it said. She inhaled, voice steady. I did not trick anything. I taught them to shine. The shadow leaned close, cold enough to crystallize moisture between them. Then teach carefully. If they learn to shine too brightly, they will burn you out. Her throat tightened. Balance was never still. The shadow dissolved. She stood alone, chest heaving, senses slowly returning. Partial restoration. The memory of drums returned faintly, dull, distant, but present. The ceremonial hairpin lingered at edge of awareness, not fully recovered, but no longer void. She sighed with relief. Above, clouds thinned. Stars blinked awake. Amaterasu turned her steps homeward, fatigue threading her tendons. Each muscle fiber hummed with exertion, but identity remained intact. Memory returned in fragments, weaving back together slowly. She now understood her illumination's consequence intimately. She would not squander it blindly again. As she walked, villagers' internal lights pulsed gently, each a constellation of possibilities. She smiled. The world glowed because she taught it how, and for the first time since emerging from exile, she did not feel hollow. She felt hope. Dawn seeped across the horizon like a pale river of liquid gold, spilling into valleys where morning fog hovered like suspended breath. Amaterasu walked through the forest silently, each footfall soft on moss that exhaled damp warmth beneath her toes. The air trembled with the residual vibration of her recent work. The threads she had woven now subtle currents running through every leaf, stone, and stream. It was comforting, but heavy. Each pulse carried gratitude, expectation, and subtle entropy, tiny imbalances she would feel in her chest long after humans had awakened. Ahead, the trees parted to reveal a courtyard unlike any she had encountered. It was framed entirely by mirrors, tall, polished panels that reflected sunlight back and forth in infinite sequences. The air shimmered, distorted with refracted light, bending space and perception. Shadows twisted subtly along the edges of the mirrors, as if something within watched. She stepped forward, and every step sent ripples across reflected reality, sending fragments of herself forward into infinite corridors of possibility. A soft wind whispered through the court, carrying voices she could not immediately place. Some were hers, or could have been: laughter, sorrow, reprimand, memory. Others were unfamiliar, soft, curious, probing. She paused, letting her senses stretch into the reflections. Each mirror seemed to possess its own consciousness, filtering, speaking, and judging with 1,000 simultaneous perspectives. It was intoxicating and exhausting. A figure stepped from the farthest corner of the courtyard. Uzume, her bell-tipped sash catching every stray beam, scattering them like fireflies. "This is the mirror court," she said, voice low, almost reverent. "Each reflection holds truth, half-truth, and the possibility of both. Few can endure its lessons." Amaterasu surveyed the expanse. Mirrors rose to impossible heights, their upper edges lost in clouds, surfaces rippling faintly, like water disturbed by unseen hands. Her own reflection multiplied endlessly. Each version of herself moved independently, displaying fragments of memory, exile, fear, rage, solitude, joy, and light unspent. Some versions approached her eagerly, others recoiled in shame. Their eyes gleamed with awareness, accusatory and pleading. She felt the cost of her illumination still lingering, the residual emptiness from previous exertions tugging at her mind. Her pulse quickened as she reached for the nearest reflection. It froze, mirroring her touch, yet the sensation did not return fully. Memory fragments remained elusive, teasing her with what had been lost in service to the world. "Mirrors do not lie," Uzume continued, stepping closer, "but they do demand acknowledgement. To enter fully is to face the cost of every action, every omission, every light given and withheld." Amaterasu exhaled, focusing on her reflection directly in front. Its eyes glimmered with fear, the fear of failing again, of leaving threads untended, of losing herself entirely to the currents of expectation. She reached inward, threading calm through her ribs, summoning the collected patience learned from previous chapters. Her reflection wavered, shadows softening, fear thinning into awareness. The court itself reacted, mirrors aligned subtly, creating pathways of light that pulsed beneath her steps, guiding her deeper into the expanse. She followed instinct, weaving her path with the precision of someone who understood both cost and consequence. At the center of the courtyard, a circular mirror hovered, suspended without support. It was framed with starlight and etched with faint, pulsing symbols of old cosmic patterns. This was no ordinary reflection. It shimmered with potential. Within it, she saw not herself, but the interconnectedness of the world. Villages, rivers, forests, mountains, all linked through light and shadow. And within these threads, she detected faint distortions, unhealed grief, lingering imbalance, and a subtle echo of darkness she had not yet encountered. She reached for the mirror. Its surface rippled beneath her fingers, drawing her vision inward, pulling her consciousness into its depths. Scenes unfolded rapidly: a child weeping for a lost parent, a river overtopping its banks, a village lit by lanterns now ghostly and dim. Each image struck her ribs, a physical sensation of tightness. The cost of illumination pressed harder here. Every gesture toward correction drew another fragment from her memory or sensory capacity. Amaterasu gritted her teeth. She had learned to distribute her light, to teach mortals to shine for themselves. But here, at the mirror court, the stakes were internal. To heal the fractures, she would need to embrace them fully. Even as each effort drew threads of identity from her chest, she inhaled sharply, letting the first contraction of fear settle through her spine. Your cost. A whisper emerged from the shadows of a mirrored corridor. Is not weakness. It is understanding. Amaterasu looked. From the reflections, an older version of herself stepped forward. This one's gaze was unwavering, fierce yet tender, eyes deep with the knowledge of every cycle endured. It spoke without sound, embedding the truth directly into her mind. To give without restraint is unsustainable. To give with intention is mastery. She felt the words vibrate through her chest, warming empty corridors of sensation. She nodded, grounding herself. The shadows of the mirror court acknowledged her comprehension, flickering with approval. Light pulsed along the mirror's edges, refracted through infinite angles. Each pulse returned a fragment of memory: the scent of plum blossoms in spring, the tactile warmth of a sibling's hand, the taste of first harvest rice. Slowly, she felt herself knit together, sensory threads returning, yet tempered by caution. She understood that illumination was a force to be wielded, measured, and guided, never squandered. Uzumi stepped forward again, bells jingling softly, guiding her through the final passage. The court reflects not only the world, but yourself, she said. You must leave with awareness, not abandon. The cost is always present, but now you can honor it. Amaterasu approached the exit. The mirrors shimmered, folding into themselves, leaving only a soft glow in the clearing. She stepped into the forest beyond, sunlight touching her once more, steady and gentle. Her chest still bore the echo of effort, a reminder of what had been spent. Yet she walked forward with mastery. Each heartbeat measured the balance of giving and retaining. Each breath reinforced that illumination could sustain both herself and the world if wielded with care. The forest seemed to breathe with her. Leaves swayed in harmony, rivers murmured in quiet rhythm, and even the wind seemed to settle, acknowledging her passage. She was radiant, tempered by cost, aware of the delicate equilibrium that would guide her steps henceforth. Forward was no longer an impulse, it was intentional, measured, and resilient. She carried illumination like a living, breathing instrument, precious, powerful, and infinitely aware of its limits. Dawn spilled across the valley like molten gold, dripping between rooftops and into narrow alleys. Lanterns, dormant through the night, caught the early light and glimmered faintly, suspended between shadows and awakening sunbeams. Villagers stirred in quiet clusters, hands brushing dew from the rice paddies, preparing ceremonial stands and ritual threads for the festival that marked the turning of seasons, a celebration long forgotten in some villages and held sacred in others. Amaterasu watched from the ridge above, her presence subtle, yet radiating warmth like a heartbeat under the skin of the world. Each thread of silk hung between poles and trees carried more than color. It carried intention, red for courage, gold for prosperity, green for renewal. Amaterasu could sense the emotional charge woven into every fiber, the microcurrents of hope, fear, anticipation, and reverence vibrating through them, echoing back along invisible pathways into her chest. Her fingers itched to touch them, to braid her own light into the loom of mortal celebration. But she held herself in check. Every beam of illumination carried cost, and she had learned to measure it. A breeze teased the threads, lifting their patterns like the wings of great invisible butterflies. The villagers murmured blessings, some unaware of the divine attention threading itself through their rituals. Children ran along the alleys, weaving between poles, trailing laughter that plucked at her ribs, tugging memories of her own laughter long buried in the cave of exile. The joy of innocence brushed against her sternum, warm, tender, but fleeting. She inhaled, letting the sensation saturate her, knowing the next thread of light she gave would take something from her in exchange. She descended into the village, steps soft against stone-paved alleys. The aroma of early cooking drifted through the air, rice steaming in earthen bowls, sweet miso soup simmering over low embers, pickled greens releasing pungent tang into the morning. Her nostrils flared. Each scent was a note in a symphony she could feel pulsing in her chest. She could almost taste the collective expectation, layered like the ingredients in each meal. Anticipation, devotion, love, humility. A group of children approached, their hands outstretched, eyes wide. They did not ask for light aloud. Their gestures were prayer enough. Amaterasu knelt, letting her palms hover above their heads. Warmth spilled into their skin, a gentle infusion that strengthened, comforted, guided. But at the instant of contact, she felt the subtle hollowing that came with each blessing. A small fragment of her memory flickered and faded. The first blush of sunlight she had ever felt on her own hair, the laughter of siblings long gone, the scent of incense in a shrine she had visited only once. The cost was quiet, insidious yet necessary. She adjusted, threading patience into her sternum, holding the hollow spaces open without despair. The children giggled, running toward the rice paddies, now sparkling with morning dew and her careful illumination. She exhaled, absorbing a tremor of gratitude that throbbed like heartbeat in her collarbone. Elder women prepared ceremonial stands along the central square. Each pole bore a luminous silk thread intended to converge in a grand weave at the festival's heart. Villagers' hands trembled with care, embedding hopes and wishes into the fabric. Amaterasu approached the threads with slow deliberation, sensing the accumulated emotional energy, worry, ambition, sorrow, yearning, delight. Her palms brushed lightly against the silk, and currents of light wove themselves invisibly into the fibers. She felt the familiar tug of cost, faint yet present, a fleeting taste, the warmth of a memory half remembered, a color once vivid now subdued. She ignored it, focusing on the greater flow, the joy, the sustenance, the communal heartbeat. The festival began as the sun rose fully, threads shimmering like captured aurora. Villagers danced in spirals around the central weave, movements precise yet fluid, echoing cycles of planting and harvest. Children chased luminous wisps that hovered in arcs above the rice fields, their laughter rising and folding into the rhythm of ritual drums. Each beat resonated through her chest, vibrating in synchrony with her own pulse. She felt both the exhilaration and the subtle cost in tandem, memory shifting, senses muted here and there, yet perception enriched in other, unforeseen ways. Amaterasu's reflection in the river running through the village caught her attention. Her visage multiplied in the ripples, smiling, solemn, radiant, anxious, each image a facet of herself she had encountered or suppressed. She reached toward one reflection, fingertips skimming the surface of water, light threading through the connection. The villagers' mirrored intention intertwined with her illumination, producing a visible glow along the edges of their clothing, the threads of the festival, the soil beneath their feet. The weave of their collective spirit now shimmered with a tangible, almost electric radiance, stabilizing crops, invigorating trees, and strengthening communal bonds. Yet each pulse of radiance drained her subtly. The warmth in her chest now carried faint hollows, the echo of sensations she had given to sustain the festival's harmony. She felt the bittersweet tug, the cost of illumination, a memory of her mother's touch, the precise timbre of a festival drum, a familiar scent of the first blooms of spring, all dimmed slightly within her. She pressed a hand against her ribs, threading attention into the hollow spaces, not to recover what was lost, but to acknowledge it, to honor it. From the far edge of the square, a fox spirit danced amid the threads, tails sweeping arcs that refracted light in cascading patterns. Its presence reminded her that not all illumination came from her alone. Some radiance could be drawn from the participants themselves, curiosity, devotion, intent. She adjusted her focus, directing attention not only outward, but inward, into the hearts of the villagers. Tiny sparks ignited in their eyes and gestures, subtle but potent. Each spark relieved her of some burden, distributing light so that the festival became a network of luminous intent, sustainable, shared. Time rippled differently here, measured in beats of drums, laughter, and the subtle glow of silk threads. Amaterasu walked among the villagers, every gesture deliberate, a nod, a gentle touch on a child's shoulder, the faintest guidance of breeze, to lift lanterns at just the right moment. Each act carried weight, each act carried cost, but she had learned to balance it, threading energy into those most receptive, allowing the festival's collective rhythm to carry her light where it was needed most. By afternoon, the threads converged in the central square. Villagers wove together their hopes, dreams, and prayers. Guided by subtle hints of illumination she allowed to slip between them. The resultant pattern shimmered like a constellation, spun of silk and sunlight, dancing across stone and air, bridging mortal and divine. Amaterasu stood at the edge, chest expanded, pulse steady. She felt cost, yes, fragmented memory, dulled sensory echoes, but also the profound satisfaction of resonance achieved. The villagers had become active participants in the web of life, light flowing through them as it had through her. Evening approached, lanterns ignited, floating along the river like captured stars. Shadows lengthened and entwined with threads of gold and red. The festival's final dance began, villagers spiraling toward the central weave, moving in harmony with cycles of planting, harvest, and human connection. Amaterasu watched, steady and luminous, feeling the weave hum beneath her fingertips through the threads, the air, and the vibrations of joy and reverence. At nightfall, she stepped back to the ridge, viewing the valley in its full splendor. Threads glimmered with self-sustaining light, reflections dancing across the river, rooftops, and fields. She felt the subtle hollows in her chest, the inevitable cost, but it was balanced by the radiance, now flowing autonomously among the villagers. For the first time, she realized that illumination did not require her to be the sole source. It required guidance, restraint, and the willingness to let others shine. Above, stars blinked awake, responding subtly to the festival's light. The world breathed as one organism, human, divine, and natural, in unison. Amaterasu exhaled, shoulders loosening, eyes glinting with soft satisfaction. The Festival of Threads was not merely an event. It was a living map of cycles, intent, and connection, a tangible manifestation of balance achieved. And she, though diminished in small fragments of memory and sensation, had mastered the art of illumination without exhaustion. Forward motion remained. Tomorrow would bring more cycles, more interactions, more cost. But tonight, the festival existed as proof that light, when guided with intention, could grow beyond the giver. The valley slept beneath a thin mist that clung to rooftops and rice paddies like whispered memory. Amaterasu walked alone along a narrow ridge above the village, her bare feet pressing against damp earth, the morning chill threading through skin and bone. The festival's light from the previous day lingered faintly in the air, residues of radiance still breathing, still alive. But now there was a hush, a pause, a gap where human celebration had ended. She felt it as a hollow vibration against her sternum, subtle yet insistent, a ghost echo of her own giving, a reminder that illumination always required sacrifice. She inhaled deeply, the smell of wet soil, morning dew, and early incense curling through her nostrils. It brought forth fragments of memory she had thought forgotten, the scent of plum blossoms in spring, the damp musk of caves from her exile, the metallic tang of sunlit rivers she had once bathed in. Each memory arrived like a note, vibrating against nerves, then dissipated, leaving a hollow ache behind. Walking along the ridge, she saw shadows lingering beneath trees, not from absence of sun, but from her own internal projection. They were echoes of past selves, unprocessed moments of grief, anger, and longing, reflections that refused to settle. One shadow moved as she did, yet its timing lagged fractionally, like a heartbeat offset. It whispered, soft and persistent, "You cannot carry all. You will lose yourself." Amaterasu stopped. The wind rustled through leaves, carrying the faint scent of roasted chestnuts and morning fires. She pressed her fingers against her ribs, feeling the ghost of yesterday's illumination. The cost had been paid, not by others, but by fragments of her own self. And now, in the quiet, those fragments sought return, or at least acknowledgement. A river below gurgled, its current slow but precise. Water spirits flickered at its edges, restless. They murmured in language older than human, memory, not in words but in pulses, against the soles of her feet. Each pulse tugged at nerves, invoking sensations of absence, forgotten faces, lost laughter, unclaimed warmth. She inhaled, grounding herself against the sensory tide. Presence must anchor absence, she reminded herself. A village child ran past, barefoot, clutching a woven silk thread from the festival. The child's laughter brushed her heart, both tender and piercing. She reached out instinctively, fingers brushing air near the thread, allowing a sliver of light to reinforce it. The cost hummed beneath her sternum, a subtle emptiness where memory and sensation had been. She swallowed hard, eyes misting, the echo of what she had given tugging at her spine. The ridge narrowed, leading to a grove of ancient cedar and pine. The air was thick with humidity and sap, each breath tasting of resin and earth. Shadows clung to the tree trunks like silk ribbons. She traced a hand along rough bark, grounding herself, yet the grove itself seemed to pulse with residual absence, unspoken fears, overlooked griefs, small fractures left in her wake by previous actions. Even as she healed the village, there were echoes of what remained unhealed. Moments she could not reach, people she could not fully touch. Her reflection appeared in a pool, dark and still. It was not her face alone, but a mosaic. Fragments of memory, shards of past selves, whispers of exile, and remnants of light spent. Each fragment glimmered faintly, refracted through the water, a visual echo of her internal depletion. She knelt, fingers tracing the surface, feeling a faint pulse where yesterday's radiance had flowed into others. I am whole only in fragments, she realized, and only when I honor their existence. Time shifted as she watched. Minutes stretched into hours, past bleeding into present, present into possible futures. She saw herself in moments unchosen. A child left unlit by festival lights, a river allowed to stagnate, a memory never claimed. Each potential echoed with weight, pressing against ribs and shoulders. She shivered, absorbing the resonance of absence. A sudden wind swept through the grove, carrying voices, not human, not fully divine, but in between. They were whispers of what she had not been able to preserve. The laughter of siblings lost in exile, the scent of a ceremonial robe she had touched only once, the precise vibration of festival drums now half forgotten. Each voice tugged at her consciousness, urging acknowledgement, demanding attention. Amaterasu closed her eyes, letting each echo ripple through her. She let grief, longing, and regret wash over her without resistance. Chest tightening, she threaded breath through hollow spaces, pulling fragments together, not to restore what was lost, but to honor its existence. The absence was real, palpable, a companion to her light. It pressed against her sternum, a reminder that giving carried inevitable voids. From the shadows, a fox spirit emerged, tails flickering in arcs that scattered light across the grove. "You have given much," it whispered, voice soft yet resonant, and yet the echoes remain. "I know," Amaterasu said, voice trembling, "and I cannot retrieve all. Some is lost, some must remain in shadow." She inhaled deeply, pressing fingertips to her temples. "I can only honor them." The fox circled her once, then melted into the mist. She felt the grove exhale, tension loosening slightly. Presence anchored absence. She stood, letting the lingering echoes thread along her spine, shoulder, and heart, not to suppress but to integrate. Walking further, she reached a cliff overlooking the river valley. The morning sun caught the river's surface, casting sparks that scattered across trees and fields. She traced the light with her mind, each pulse carrying both illumination and absence, a duality she could now perceive fully. She let the light flow outward, threading gently through villages, through fields, through forests, guiding, sustaining, but no longer taking more than she could bear. A ripple of movement caught her eye. Across the river, villagers began spontaneous ritual dances, arms tracing arcs, laughter echoing across water, creating their own light. Sparks of energy leapt from their gestures, feeding into the valley's network, returning some illumination to her in small, balanced increments. She smiled faintly, relief threading through ribs. Her reflection shimmered again in the river below, but now it was steadier. Fragmented echoes remained, but they hummed in concert with her own rhythm. Absence had been acknowledged, balanced with presence. The cost was real, yet manageable. She could continue giving, continue guiding, without vanishing into the hollow spaces. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of incense and earth, birdsong threading above the mist. Amaterasu inhaled, letting the resonance settle through every fiber of her being. The echoes of absence were no longer threats, but companions, reminders of the delicate balance between illumination and loss, between giving and sustaining. She took a slow step forward, leaving the ridge. Each footfall pressed into earth, her light tracing gentle currents through soil, stream, and air. Villagers' laughter echoed behind her, mingling with the remnants of festival radiance. The world felt alive, interwoven, and in that interweaving, she felt the quiet satisfaction of mastery over cost, presence, and memory. She exhaled, shoulders loosening. Forward motion remained inevitable, but for the first time, the hollows of absence no longer threatened collapse. They were part of her rhythm, part of the cycles. She now understood intimately. Night fell gently, stars emerging like scattered lanterns across the sky. Amaterasu paused, watching, chest still humming with the echo of giving and the resonance of absence. Balance had not been fully achieved. It never would be, but understanding had arrived. That alone sufficed. The air shimmered with latent energy, vibrating against Amaterasu's skin as she ascended a ridge overlooking the sacred mountain where the kami gathered. Mist curled like serpents around jagged peaks, refracting sunlight into fragile prisms of gold and silver. Her heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of distant waterfalls, each pulse resonating against stone and sky alike. The festival of threads lingered faintly in the valley below, threads of radiance still stretching across villages, fields, and rivers. An invisible web she had woven with care and intention. Ahead, the sacred court emerged, suspended on terraces, carved into sheer rock faces. Pillars of carved cedar bore intricate spirals and sigils, echoing cycles of moon, sun, and tide. A thin veil of cloud framed the gathering. The air smelled of ozone and pine resin, tinged with faint smoke from ceremonial fires. Every breath she took hummed against her nerves, carrying resonance from the presence of other divine beings. Tsukuyomi awaited at the edge of the first terrace, moonlight pooling around him in subtle ripples. His gaze was calm, yet probing, as though measuring the invisible threads that connected her to the world below. "You have stabilized the valley," he said softly, voice smooth and resonant, like water over stone. "But cycles extend beyond mortals." The kami noticed imbalance. Amaterasu nodded, feeling the residual hollows from previous illumination tug at her sternum. She inhaled deeply, drawing energy from the surrounding terraces, letting subtle currents flow into her chest to steady herself. "I am aware," she said. "I am learning to balance light with cost, presence with restraint." A rustle of wings drew her attention. Susanoo descended, tempest in form and posture, silver hair streaming like storm clouds. He moved between terraces with deliberate, predatory grace, eyes flashing with both challenge and curiosity. "Balance is easier spoken than held," he said, voice low and commanding, carrying the undercurrent of ocean and wind. "Mortals are fragile, their devotion fleeting. Do you assume all will obey threads of your weaving?" "I assume nothing," Amaterasu replied evenly, though her chest throbbed with tension. "I guide, I measure, I teach. Mortals may falter, but their resilience is their own. My illumination is not control, it is sustenance." Susanoo stepped closer, footfalls soft on the carved stone. "Yet even sustenance has consequences. Every gift taken is a fragment lost. How long before the cost fractures you?" His question was not accusatory. It was observational, elemental, sharp as lightning over ocean. She considered this, fingers brushing along the terrace railing, sensing the resonance of stone beneath. Calloused skin. "I am aware," she said, voice quieter now, "and I do not refuse cost. I integrate it. Absence does not unmake me. It teaches me. I have learned that loss is as vital as light, and the echoes of absence shape understanding. A faint ripple of movement behind Susanoo drew her attention. A trio of lesser kami emerged, their forms partially ethereal, partially corporeal. One bore the scent of harvests, fertile and pungent. Another carried wind and rain in shifting currents. The last shimmered with quiet embers, like fire contained yet restless. Their gazes flickered toward her, not judgmental, but expectant, awaiting acknowledgement of divine responsibility. You balance cycles, Amaterasu, the harvest kami murmured, voice rustling like grain. But cycles are not merely mortal. Rivers, mountains, winds, they all respond to intention and neglect. How do you intend to manage the threads beyond villages? She inhaled, letting her mind stretch outward, sensing subtle shifts in environmental currents, the flow of rivers, the rhythm of tides, the subtle hum of forest growth. By weaving guidance, not dominance, by teaching mortals to shine for themselves, I free energy for wider cycles. By acknowledging my own limitations, I conserve illumination. By monitoring feedback from the environment and the kami, I respond rather than impose. The fire kami tilted its head, sparks flickering along its ephemeral form. And the shadows that linger? You have integrated absence among mortals, but will you recognize it among us? Amaterasu closed her eyes. She could feel the subtle threads of her own past, exile, fear, frustration, and the lingering hollows of previous gifts, interacting with the ambient currents of the court. Shadows of doubt, of unspent anger, of overlooked grief hovered like smoke, persistent, patient. I must, she said finally. Every presence carries absence. I cannot ignore it, or it will fracture not just myself, but the balance I aim to sustain. A wind stirred the terraces, carrying scents of salt, pine, and ozone. Tsukuyomi's gaze softened slightly. Recognition is the first step, he said. Integration the second. Balance will not be perfect. Never forget that. Imperfection is the framework of cycles. Susanu's expression shifted, a flicker of something softer beneath the storm. Perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps challenge deferred. You speak well, he said, but words are not actions. Light is tested in motion, not reflection. The next cycles will demand decisions. Choose wisely, for every thread has consequence. Amaterasu inhaled, letting these words anchor her. She could feel the subtle tug of cycles converging, the pulse of forests, rivers, winds, and humans, all threading with her illumination. Every heartbeat of the world demanded her attention, yet she understood now that her role was not omnipotence, but mediation, guidance measured, restraint practiced, awareness constant. A subtle shimmer along the terraces drew her gaze. The lesser kami extended gestures of blessing, threads of divine resonance, brushing her shoulders and chest, reinforcing her energy without overtaxing her reserves. It was a delicate balance. Receive just enough, give just enough, observe always. She spoke aloud, words carrying both gravity and calm. I will honor cycles, mortal and divine alike. I will integrate absence and presence. I will guide light without dominance, measure cost without fear, and I will watch for echoes of both joy and shadow to inform my actions. A hush settled over the court. Even Susanu's tempest seemed contained, the winds aligning, the terraces vibrating with subtle approval. Tsukuyomi inclined his head, pale light glinting off the ridges of stone. Words become deeds, he said. Deeds become legacy. Let your actions weave the cycles faithfully. The fire Kami pulsed faintly, embers drifting upward like slow stars. And remember, it said, cycles demand patience. Illumination is powerful, but fragile in untempered hands. Amaterasu closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of energy, divine, mortal, and environmental, threading through her body. Every sensation carried the weight of responsibility. Light and absence, action and restraint, presence and reflection. Each heartbeat was a deliberate choice, each breath a reaffirmation of her commitment. She opened her eyes and stepped forward onto the central terrace. Below, the valley lay quilted in morning light, the threads of the festival still faintly pulsing in harmony with her awareness. From this height, she could sense the entirety of cycles, human, natural, and divine, entangled in delicate resonance. She inhaled deeply, letting that knowledge settle into her ribs, spine, and mind. The kami watched silently. Some offered subtle nods, others remained statuesque, observing, testing, waiting. Amaterasu knew that future decisions would require courage, discernment, and patience. Her words, her illumination, her presence would be measured not merely in immediate effects, but in long-reaching cycles. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself against the weight of expectation. Balance was not a destination. It was a continuous process, an unending negotiation between giving and sustaining. She was ready. Forward motion remained inevitable, yet purposeful. Every step she took would weave cycles tighter, integrate absence, and distribute illumination with care. The Festival of Threads had demonstrated her ability among mortals. Now, in the presence of the kami, she had refined her role among divinity itself. Above, sunlight fractured against clouds and terraces, glinting in refracted gold and silver. Amaterasu inhaled, steady, aware, and luminous. The path ahead was fraught with cycles, echoes, and shadows, but she would navigate it with intention, measured generosity, and a profound understanding of both cost and consequence. The ocean below churned with slow, deliberate rhythm, tides rolling like breathing lungs against jagged cliffs. Amaterasu stood at the edge of the sacred promontory, wind tugging at her robes, salt air biting at exposed skin. Light fractured across the water's surface in ribbons of gold and silver, moving with a pulse she could feel deep in her chest. Each wave carried memory, consequence, and potential. The world she had touched, the lives illuminated, the shadows inadvertently left behind. She inhaled sharply, the brine mingling with pine from nearby groves, damp earth, and the faint trace of incense from rituals long past. The air vibrated with currents she had not noticed before, subtle disturbances in the balance of river mouths, harvests slightly delayed, tides slightly off-kilter. Every ripple, every wave whispered fragments of her influence, reflections of light both sustained and misaligned. Her reflection shimmered on the water's surface. Not a single visage, but countless overlapping possibilities. In some, she smiled gently, hair glinting with sunlight, eyes soft with patience. In others, she recoiled, shadows pooling where her light had overreached, eyes heavy with loss, chest hollow from giving too much. Each iteration vibrated with potential outcomes, threads of cycles, yet unresolved. She touched the water, fingertips barely grazing the surface, and felt a pull, a tug of consequence echoing across human, natural, and divine spheres. The tide shifted, waves rose higher, folding reflections into themselves, swirling possibilities into currents she could scarcely track. One scene emerged clearly, a village far upstream, unaware that their irrigation relied on her careful guidance, now suffering under a delayed flow. Another, a forest, vibrant with life, yet subtly out of rhythm with seasonal blooms. A third, a festival thread, unclaimed and fraying, fading under neglect. She exhaled, chest tightening. The cost of her light, distributed widely and measured carefully, still reverberated in unseen ways. She had guided, she had taught restraint, she had balanced absence with presence. But even mastery carried imperfection. Every reflection was both opportunity and warning. A ripple across the water coalesced into a vision of herself from the cave of exile, young and trembling, uncertain of purpose. She remembered fear, rage, and isolation. The memory pressed against her ribs like cold stone, reminding her that cycles were never linear. Every act of illumination pulled from the past, threaded through the present, and projected into infinite possibilities. She knelt at the tide's edge, water lapping against her fingers. She reached into the reflections, threading awareness into each scene, gentle adjustments, guidance toward balance, small interventions that could cascade into harmony without consuming her entirely. The water responded, reflections aligning subtly, currents softening, light refracting in more stable arcs. Still, fragments of loss remained, trees unshaped, children unaware, shadows lingering where her influence had not fully reached. A faint glow appeared behind her. Uzume stepped from the cliffs, sash jingling softly, eyes bright with quiet understanding. The tides reflect not only what you give, but what you cannot, she said. Each ripple holds potential, each shadow a lesson. Do not be bound by perfection. Learn to navigate, to adjust, to integrate. Amaterasu inhaled, letting the words settle into her chest, spine, and mind. I see, she said softly. The cycles are alive, responsive, and often beyond immediate comprehension. My light must flow, but I cannot force harmony. It must be guided, not imposed. Uzume smiled faintly, stepping closer. Exactly. Your illumination is vital, yet finite. Recognition of limitations is not weakness. It is mastery. Watch the tides. Learn their rhythm. Let absence and presence coexist. Amaterasu rose, tracing her gaze over the ocean, cliffs, and valleys beyond. Waves rose and fell, tides pulsing with subtle feedback, carrying echoes of past cycles and hints of futures yet to unfold. She could feel the resonance of her influence in each swell, the gentle push of humans tending crops, the alignment of rivers with the seasons, the subtle shift of wind across forests. Her illumination had spread, and yet it was not absolute. The responsibility was not merely to act, but to perceive, adjust, and integrate. Time rippled differently here. Past, present, and potential outcomes intertwined in overlapping currents. She saw herself blessing the village in the valley, threads shimmering, yet also the possibility of fatigue, miscalculation, or absence. She saw festivals in distant towns, rivers diverted too quickly, harvests delayed by subtle misalignment. Each scenario pulsed against her chest like a heartbeat, reminding her of cost, consequence, and the delicate balance of giving without losing herself. She stepped into the water, cool and grounding, allowing the tide to wash over her feet. Sensations folded over her, the hollow spaces left by previous illumination, the echoes of joy in the festival threads, the subtleties of absence in mortal cycles. She let them merge, not to eliminate loss, but to acknowledge it fully. Her body, mind, and chest absorbed the interplay, weaving comprehension into her very being. From the water's edge, she reached outward with light, not blinding, not overwhelming, but subtle, coaxing, guiding. Currents responded, shifting slightly to redistribute energy where needed. Villages, forests, rivers, all felt her touch, and yet she remained distinct, aware of cost, hollowed fragments, and memory echoes. Presence and absence now coexisted in a rhythm she could navigate. A gull cried overhead, wings cutting arcs across sunlit tides. Its freedom reminded her that cycles moved independently, that guidance was never control, that life persisted in balance with unseen laws. She inhaled deeply, chest expanding. She understood now that illumination could sustain both herself and the world, but only if tempered with awareness, patience, and respect for the natural rhythm of consequences. Uzume stepped back, allowing the waves to pulse freely. You have learned to observe, integrate, and adjust, she said. Now, you must trust the cycles themselves. Your guidance is not perfection, but it is influence, and that is enough. Amaterasu nodded, eyes tracing the horizon where ocean met sky, cliffs met forest, and cycles intertwined invisibly across time and space. She exhaled slowly, letting the pull of absence and presence settle into steady rhythm. Each heartbeat reaffirmed her understanding. Mastery was measured in perception, restraint, and ongoing adaptation. The tides reflected light and shadow alike, pulses of consequence and potential, an eternal mirror of her choices. She let the waves carry fragments of memory, fragments of absence, threading balance into their flow, integrating cost without overextension. She stood, chest lifted, gaze clear, awareness radiant, yet tempered. Forward motion remained inevitable. The cycles demanded attention, intervention, and care. But she had learned to navigate tides, reflections, and echoes, not as a slave to perfection, but as a master of measured illumination. Her light could persist, her presence could sustain, her influence could guide, without losing herself to the hollows of absence. Above, the sun descended toward horizon, glinting across waves in cascading gold and silver. Amaterasu inhaled, steady, aware, luminous, ready to carry the lessons of reflection into the next cycles, the next challenges, the next responsibilities. The tides had taught her illumination must always move with balance, awareness, and the subtle wisdom of cost. The first light of dawn stretched across the valley like molten silk, brushing mountaintops, river bends, and forest edges with delicate gold. Amaterasu stood at the center of the sacred terrace, a massive loom spanning from cliff to cliff, threads of sunlight already caught between its towering frames. The structure pulsed with latent energy, a convergence of natural cycles and mortal intention, a lattice awaiting guidance. Wind stirred the threads, lifting them into arcs that shimmered like the wings of celestial birds. Each thread carried more than mere light. It carried consequence, intention, and the subtle weight of human and divine emotion. Red for courage, gold for prosperity, green for renewal. Threads threaded by mortals in devotion, now awaiting the subtle weaving of her illumination. She extended her hands, sensing the vibrations of countless lives pulsing along each strand, feeling the echoes of absence left from prior gifts. The loom responded to her presence, tension adjusting, threads aligning with currents of wind, gravity, and divine energy. Each pull of her hand set a rhythm, every breath threading coordination across dimensions of space and time. The valley below breathed in response, villagers stirring as sunlight caught their rooftops, rippling across rice paddies, and coaxing blossoms open. She inhaled deeply, chest pressing against the hollow fragments she had carried through illumination and reflection. Memories of exile, fear, and joy mingled with residual fragments of yesterday's festival, layering her consciousness like a complex tapestry. Threads of consequence tugged against her awareness, subtle reminders that creation and balance demanded precise attention. A fox spirit leapt across the loom, tails flicking, scattering arcs of ephemeral light that interwove with the threads. Its presence was playful, chaotic, yet essential, an embodiment of cycles unbound, spontaneity within structure. Amaterasu smiled faintly, allowing the threads to respond, integrating the spark of unpredictability. Balance required both discipline and grace, structure and flexibility. She adjusted the tension, guiding a golden strand over the loom's frame, directing it to converge with red and green in a pattern that would amplify courage and renewal while preserving prosperity. The movement carried weight beyond the visual. Ripples flowed into rivers, softening currents, invigorating fields, aligning sunlight with leaf and petal, guiding human intention subtly yet profoundly. Her chest pulsed with a familiar tug, the cost of illumination, but she welcomed it now as a sign of integration rather than depletion. Hollow spaces left by prior, giving threaded with presence, echoing in harmony rather than dissonance. She inhaled, centering awareness, allowing absent fragments to coexist Alongside active influence, each heartbeat became a shuttle, weaving balance through fabric, air, and energy. A faint glow appeared along the valley below. Villagers had begun spontaneous rituals of their own, dancing, planting, blessing threads that reached beyond the loom. Their intentions pulsed like soft echoes, and Amaterasu adjusted her weaving to guide rather than dominate. She realized fully now, illumination could be collaborative. Light did not need to originate solely from her. It could flow through participants, sustained, amplified, distributed. The loom began to hum faintly, resonance vibrating through her feet, chest, and spine. Threads shimmered with alignment, pulsing in rhythm with village life, forest cycles, and river flows. Sunlight caught the edges of silk strands, scattering prisms across cliff and canopy. Every movement of her hands produced visible and invisible consequences: growth, alignment, subtle correction, but never at the cost of erasure. Absence was integrated, cycles allowed autonomy, and presence persisted. Above, birds took flight, their wing beats coinciding with the rhythm of the loom. Their cries threaded into the valley's resonance, aligning with human laughter, rustling leaves, and flowing rivers. The complex tapestry of life pulsed with amplified energy, and Amaterasu felt her role shift. No longer simply provider of light, she was now a mediator of cycles, a conductor orchestrating harmony between mortal action and divine guidance. Sudden ripple of reflection caught her attention. Threads not only carried current cycles, but echoes of potential futures. She reached into them with subtle intention, guiding misaligned strands into alignment, reinforcing stability without overriding autonomy. A frayed edge in one village's thread would have caused future scarcity. She adjusted, drawing subtle energy to correct the pattern, yet leaving room for free will. Wind swept across the terrace, carrying scents of pine, salt, wet earth, and incense from distant shrines. Her fingers traced arcs through air and thread, the movement intuitive yet deliberate, blending subtlety and precision. Every decision resonated across multiple layers, mortal and divine, present and future, tangible and intangible. She felt the hum of interconnection, a delicate orchestration where light, absence, and consequence danced in synchrony. The loom responded, threads aligning into intricate patterns visible from cliffs and valleys below. Villagers paused to marvel at the shimmering arcs, their participation amplifying the weave. Children ran along paths where illumination followed footsteps, streams reflecting arcs of gold and red, blossoms opening in concert with rhythmic pulse. Each act of acknowledgement, intention, or joy contributed, reducing cost from her chest, distributing energy sustainably. Amaterasu paused, letting breath anchor her awareness. Shadows of prior absence brushed lightly at her ribs, fragments of lost memories, unclaimed joy, and unspent fear. She inhaled deeply, integrating them into the rhythm of the loom rather than resisting. Absence was no longer a threat. It was a thread of balance, necessary and instructive. By afternoon, the loom of dawn reached a culmination. Threads converged, forming a radiant lattice spanning cliffs, valley, and sky. A visible representation of balance, guidance, and integration. Sunlight caught each silk arc, scattering prisms that danced across rivers, trees, rooftops, and faces of villagers. The rhythm of the loom pulsed in harmony with wind, water, and the subtle vibrations of mortal and divine cycles. Amaterasu stepped back, chest expanded, shoulders relaxed yet poised. She felt cost, not absence, not depletion, but weight balanced with mastery. The valley hummed with collective illumination, a network alive, self-sustaining, and resilient. Light flowed, absence persisted as companion, and cycles were integrated. A fox spirit leapt across the central threads one last time, scattering sparks of unpredictable energy. Amaterasu allowed the gesture, recognizing that even structure required playful improvisation. That perfection was never the aim. Harmony was. She inhaled, exhaled, and stepped off the loom, letting the pattern continue autonomously, guided but not controlled. The sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the valley. Villagers, unaware of the divine orchestration, marveled at subtle patterns, rhythms, and alignments, proof of guidance rather than dominance. Amaterasu gazed across the loom, her chest humming with quiet satisfaction. Presence, absence, cost, and light now intertwined in a tapestry. She could observe, adjust, and respect without being consumed. She inhaled deeply, aware of forward motion, cycles ahead, and responsibilities yet to be tested. Mastery was not final, but earned. She exhaled, letting wind, light, and threads carry her energy outward, reinforcing cycles across valley, mountain, and river. The loom of dawn stood as testament. Illumination could persist, guidance could sustain, and balance could be achieved without self-erasure. Night fell like velvet across the valley, soft and heavy, yet alive with subtle quivers of unseen currents. Amaterasu walked along the ridge above the loom of dawn, the threads of sunlight now faintly glowing in residual pulse, stretching across the valley like suspended ribbons of consciousness. Above, stars shimmered in clusters, some distant, others unusually close, vibrating with quiet energy that brushed against nerves and awareness alike. The wind carried whispers, not human, not fully divine, but layered echoes of the cosmos, fragments of cycles, memories of light given and absence left behind. Each whisper threaded through her mind like silk through fingers, tugging at the hollow spaces in her chest, pulling echoes of exile, doubt, and fleeting joy to the surface. She inhaled slowly, allowing each vibration to resonate, feeling how absence and presence coexisted in delicate, persistent tension. A shadow moved along the ridge, subtle and shifting, as though formed from the very night itself. It was not a threat, but a test, a reflection of all the residual darkness she had accumulated, a mirror of fragments unclaimed, memories she had integrated yet still lingered in delicate resonance. Her chest tightened at the first contact, hollow spaces tingling as the shadow brushed against ribs, spine, and collarbone. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a chorus that only she could perceive. They carried voices of the lost, of choices deferred, of potential cycles left unaligned. The stars above seemed to respond to the frequencies, pulsating faintly, each light a node of attention, a fragment of cosmic consciousness. She extended her hands, not to dispel or command, but to thread acknowledgement through the voids. Presence, she realized, required recognition of both light and shadow, illumination and absence. A distant river reflected starlight, each ripple fracturing the heavens into shards that danced across her vision. Memories flickered in the reflections. The laughter of children in villages she had blessed, the silent despair of forests she had failed to reach in time, festivals half celebrated, threads fraying in unseen valleys. Each reflection carried weight, yet she did not resist. She inhaled, allowing sorrow, regret, and joy to pulse together, integrating resonance rather than partitioning it. Footsteps approached from the dark ridge. Soft, deliberate, Uzume appeared, face illuminated by starlight, eyes glimmering with understanding. The whispers of the cosmos are not all instruction, she said softly, voice weaving with the night air. They are reminders, echoes of cycles, fragments of what is unclaimed, shadows of consequence. They test not your power, but your awareness. Amaterasu nodded, chest tightening in acknowledgement. I feel them, the fragments of absence, the remnants of cycles incomplete, the shadows of light misaligned. She extended a hand toward the river's reflection, and threads of faint luminescence rose to meet her touch, coalescing into arcs that mirrored constellations above. I do not seek to erase them. I seek to integrate them, to allow them space without letting them unravel balance. A ripple of movement stirred the darkness behind her. Shadows coalesced into vague shapes, figures of exile, fragments of fear, the memory of being hidden, ignored, unseen. Their edges flickered with uncertainty, reflecting light and absence simultaneously. She inhaled again, letting each figure pulse with acknowledgement rather than fear. Her fingers traced arcs in air and shadow, weaving subtle threads of illumination into darkness, not to dominate, but to harmonize. The stars above shifted, as though acknowledging her gesture. One particularly bright cluster fractured, scattering tiny points of light across the valley below, each star pulsing in quiet rhythm with her chest. She felt the resonance in her ribs, spine, and shoulders. The cost of illumination was never absent, never optional, but it could be balanced when presence was conscious, deliberate, and compassionate. Whispers rose in crescendo, carrying voices from distant villages, forests, rivers, and mountains. Every pulse of sound tugged at memory, fragments, joy, sorrow, fear, triumph, loss. Her chest expanded with integration, each inhalation threading awareness through hollows, each exhalation dispersing subtle guidance into the cosmic currents. She felt the universe hum beneath her skin, a living network of cycles intertwined with her own presence. Uzume stepped closer, whispering, "These whispers will never cease. Shadows will always linger where light has been given. But mastery is not eradication. It is acknowledgement, integration, and navigation." Amaterasu's gaze lifted to the sky. A particularly bright star pulsed in alignment with a distant river, valley, reflecting cycles of human and natural life. She extended both hands, drawing threads of light toward her, weaving into the arcs of star, river, and ridge. Hollow spaces in her chest tingled, but she welcomed them. They were evidence of resonance, reminders that cost was neither punishment nor weakness, but instruction. A distant owl hooted, wings cutting silent arcs against the night. Its presence reminded her that cycles were autonomous, independent of divine intervention, yet responsive to guidance. She exhaled slowly, shoulders loosening. She was neither omnipotent nor omniscient. She was a mediator, a conductor, a guardian, weaving light and shadow into equilibrium. The shadows from the ridge began to retreat, not banished, but contained, integrated into the broader field of light and absence. Threads of illumination scattered across the valley and sky, subtly aligning cycles, supporting mortal and divine intention without overreach. She inhaled deeply, grounding in the subtle rhythm of star, river, ridge, and valley. Above, the stars whispered their final notes of the night, small pulses of light threading invisible paths to villages, rivers, forests, and mountains. She felt the resonance pulse through her chest, spine, and mind. Cost, presence, absence, illumination, all converging into delicate balance. She exhaled, letting the night carry the echoes outward, trusting cycles to respond as they would. The valley below stirred faintly with early morning winds. Threads from the loom of dawn shimmered faintly in residual pulse. Her chest felt hollowed, yes, but integrated. Absence had been acknowledged, shadows harmonized, light distributed thoughtfully. Presence was no longer a singular burden, but a flowing rhythm threaded across space, time, and consciousness. Amaterasu turned toward the ridge, eyes glinting faintly with starlight. Forward motion remained inevitable. Cycles would continue, challenges would arise, shadows would persist. But now, she understood fully that mastery was not control. It was awareness, integration, guidance, and patient observation of the tides of consequence. She inhaled deeply one last time, feeling the night pulse beneath her skin, threads of star, shadow, and valley converging into rhythm. Exhalation carried gratitude, understanding, and acceptance. The whispers softened, becoming background resonance rather than testing chorus. She was ready. Light broke across the horizon with a brilliance that seemed to pause time itself. Amaterasu stood atop the highest ridge. The loom of dawn stretched behind her, threads of gold and silver shimmering faintly in the early wind. Below, the valley stirred with life, rivers flowing in precise rhythm, forests rustling with gentle harmony, villages awakening with soft murmurs of gratitude and anticipation. Every cycle she had influenced pulsed with coherence, yet still retained the autonomy that made balance possible. The air was crisp, scented with wet earth, blooming flowers, and distant incense. Each inhalation carried resonance, subtle vibrations threading through ribs, spine, and chest. She felt the echoes of absence from prior giving, shadows integrated into cycles, yet now harmonized with presence, light, and life. The weight of cost no longer burdened her. It pulsed like a companion, a reminder of wisdom gained through reflection, cycles, and restraint. She extended her hands over the loom of dawn. Threads responded, rising in arcs, converging into patterns that reflected the valley's equilibrium. Courage intertwined with patience, growth woven with subtle restraint, light threaded with acknowledgement of absence. Each movement carried tangible consequence, subtle yet profound, rippling through mortal, natural, and divine realms. A chorus of birds emerged, wing beats tracing arcs that synchronized with the thread's pulses. Their cries mingled with faint laughter from villagers below, wind rustling through pine and cedar, and the distant rhythm of river and tide. Amaterasu inhaled deeply, letting her senses absorb every vibration, every echo of consequence. The cycles she had nurtured were alive, responsive, and resilient. From the loom, soft glow emanated, threads shimmering like liquid sunlight. She traced patterns with delicate precision, integrating remnants of shadow from prior chapters, echoes of exile, moments of doubt, fragments of loss. Hollow spaces in her chest pulsed with acknowledgement rather than depletion, each beat reinforcing mastery over cost, presence, and integration. The fox spirit leapt once more across the loom, scattering sparks that threaded into patterns of unpredictability. Amaterasu allowed them to integrate seamlessly, recognizing that even perfection required space for spontaneity. The rhythm of cycles, she realized fully, demanded not control but guidance, subtle, deliberate, and observant. Above, the sky erupted into shades of gold, pink, and lavender, stars fading gracefully into dawn's embrace. The whispers of night softened into a gentle resonance, cosmic echoes now harmonized with the rhythm of cycles. Shadows were not erased, but threaded, integrated, acknowledged, a reminder that presence and absence could coexist without fracture. Tsukuyomi appeared along the ridge, pale light reflecting off his robes. "The cycles are aligned," he said quietly, voice soft, yet imbued with resonance. "Your light sustains, your guidance empowers, and your awareness honors absence. Mastery is not absolute, but balanced. You have achieved equilibrium." Susanoo stepped forward, his tempestuous aura subdued, the storm contained within calm eyes. "Balance," he said, "is not perfection. It is the continuous negotiation between influence and autonomy. You have woven threads across mortal and divine spheres without fracture. This is true illumination." Amaterasu bowed slightly, acknowledging both gods and cycles. "I have learned," she said, voice steady, "that illumination is not control. It is guidance. Presence must honor absence. Light must respect shadow. Every cycle is autonomous, yet interconnected, fragile, yet resilient. Mastery lies in observation, adjustment, and integration." The valley below seemed to exhale, rivers reflecting sunlight in shimmering ribbons, forests rustling in subtle cadence, villages alive with morning rituals. Threads of the loom of dawn glowed faintly, then dispersed into cycles of existence. Light threaded through air, water, and soil, sustaining life without coercion, nurturing without erasure. A gentle hum rose from the earth itself, vibrations threading along roots, stones, and riverbeds. Amaterasu felt the resonance pulse through her chest, spine, and hands. The cycles were complete, yet ongoing. Her presence harmonized with them, neither dominating nor absent. She inhaled deeply, letting the rhythm settle within, exhaled, and extended her hands to disperse subtle currents of light outward. Above, the sun climbed fully into the sky, scattering prisms across the valley. Shadows receded, yet remained faintly, interwoven with light as necessary counterbalance. Absence persisted in harmony with presence. Cost had been acknowledged, integrated, and balanced. Her chest pulsed steadily, not hollowed, not burdened, but attuned to cycles she now guided with conscious awareness. A ripple of movement caught her eye. Villagers began spontaneous acts of creation, planting seeds, raising lanterns, weaving threads in small acts of devotion. Their energy, intentional and autonomous, threaded into the cycles she had nurtured, amplifying light, integrating absence, and strengthening resilience. Illumination was no longer singular. It flowed through collaboration, distributed intentionally, yet naturally. She turned her gaze to distant mountains, rivers, forests, and beyond. Light, shadow, presence, and absence formed intricate patterns, cycles interwoven with intention, reflection, and adjustment. Every heartbeat, every breath, every gesture reinforced alignment, sustaining life without consuming self. She was luminous, yet grounded, expansive, yet anchored, aware yet free. The fox spirit leapt across the ridge one final time, scattering sparks that arced toward stars still faintly visible. Amaterasu extended hands, guiding light to thread gently through them, weaving unpredictability into harmony. Mastery, she realized, was not dominance. It was navigation, integration, awareness, and measured generosity across cycles that extended far beyond any single being. She inhaled deeply, chest expanding with clarity, shoulders relaxed yet poised. The cycles she had woven, observed, and guided were resilient, alive, autonomous, yet interconnected. She exhaled slowly, releasing energy, acknowledging cost, integrating absence, and embracing light. Forward motion would continue. Challenges would arise. Shadows would linger. But she was prepared. The sun now fully ascended, casting long, golden arcs across cliffs, valleys, rivers, and villages. Threads of illumination persisted in subtle rhythm, guiding cycles without imposing dominance. The valley, the forest, the rivers, and the mountains pulsed in harmony. Amaterasu inhaled, exhaled, and smiled faintly. Presence and absence, light and shadow, cost and guidance, all woven into eternal rhythm.